One more day, one more summary. We're going to be delving into the Korean action crime drama series Big Mouth today. Without further ado, make sure to settle back, unwind, and enjoy the recap, which will cover every episode. A few gold bars are buried in cement on a gloomy, wet night. Numerous news articles about corruption and tragedies reveal that a mysterious Big Mouse is the main perpetrator of several crimes in the city of Gutcheon. Big Mouse appears to be behind everything, including illegal campaign donations, the distribution of drugs, and theft from the NR Forum. It turns out that Gutcheon is one of those places that, although appearing absolutely beautiful from a distance, is actually rife with corruption and crime. No one is interested in larger objectives like social justice because the majority of people are understandably preoccupied with trying to make ends meet. One such citizen is Park Chang-ho, a mediocre lawyer whose life's goal is to have a happy family life. He meets up with his father-in-law, Gong Jae-hun, and his wife, Ko Miho, at a fancy restaurant that evening. But in the middle of the pricey dinner, he gets a call out of the blue from Prosecutor Choi, and he apologizes to his wife for having to leave dinner early. He accepts a coffee on his way out of the prosecutor's office, but as soon as he gets in his car and starts driving, he quickly finds out that he was given something different. Due to his inability to see clearly in front of him, he has a serious accident. The narrative starts a week ago, when Chang-ho was providing legal assistance to victims of a cryptocurrency scam. Chang-ho confesses to his father-in-law, the manager of his office, that he had borrowed from a money lender to bribe the judge, already terrified of his wife because he had also lost her money. But during the trial, Jae-hun and Chang-ho discover to their dismay that both the judge and the defense attorneys have changed. After the trial, other victims surrounded Chang-ho because they trusted him instead of retaining a large legal firm to handle their case. His attempts to appease the crowd proved ineffective, as his big-talking reputation had followed him into the legal profession. Later, as he is debating whether to end his career, he nervously takes Miho's call. She is not impressed with the trial's outcome, as was to be expected. Miho takes matters into her own hands when Chang-ho jokingly suggests that he consider becoming a divorce lawyer instead. She says that she would prefer a divorce from him before being called into work. That night over dinner, Chang-ho confides in his friend Soon that he's been wondering why his life has turned out the way it has. Miho witnesses her father packing up and leaving the house later that evening. Jae-hun quickly leaves the house after telling her that he should live with Chang-ho because he is unable to live alone when she asks who he would prefer to stay with in the event that she and Chang-ho get divorced. Following their meeting downstairs, Jae-hun gives his son-in-law a bag of clothes, knowing that Chang-ho will spend the night in the office until Miho's rage subsides. Then, to his surprise, he gets a call from Mayor Doha asking to meet right away to discuss a criminal case. He climbs in and heads to the mayor's office. But the trip takes longer than anticipated, and he eventually meets Mayor Doha after some off-roading. Without delay, the mayor approaches Chang-ho and requests that he investigate a murder case involving Gutcheon University Hospital, the location of Dr. Seo's body discovered inside a trunk. The hospital's in-house lawyer Lee, one of the surgeons, Dr. Han and Yang, the chairman of the foundation's son, are the three main suspects and are the mayor's friends. Since Chang-ho has a success rate of less than 10%, the mayor continues, he's the ideal lawyer for them because they've already bought out everyone and just need someone to follow their instructions. Chang-ho is about to turn down the offer when Doha informs him that the doctor, the three men, and the NR Forum, also known as the Nine Rivers Forum, are all members of the group that helped Chang-ho become mayor by meddling in internal affairs. He therefore needs some power over them to put an end to their meddling. He assures Chang-ho that if the internal dash cam recording is located, the truth will come to light. Chang-ho is further persuaded by the cash offered to him in advance after finally realizing the mayor's ulterior motive of using him as a double agent for his own benefit. He finally gets Chang-ho to agree when he suggests that an honest attorney fighting corruption would make for impressive work in an effort to persuade Chang-ho to accept. He goes to Soon first to get assistance in running some background checks on the three suspects. Chang-ho is not shocked to learn that his clients had access to all the comforts possible while incarcerated, even though they were prisoners. He introduces himself to the three suspects, and after accepting the trial's plan without question, he acts as though he won't cause any problems for their release. At that moment, They receive a call from the mayor informing them that a lawyer has provided the prosecution with information about the dashcam recording. Chang-ho recalls how Soon reported it last night using a different identity. Soon after, Chang-ho is ejected without delay. However, he makes sure to put his drink in the trash can before departing. Chang-ho then discovers, via tuning into the bug he planted, that Dr. Han gave his wife the recording. The three prisoners then talk about how crucial the recording is because it's their only source of insurance. Chang-ho understands that there has to be another accomplice after hearing this. He phones the mayor to let him know about the recording and to share his concerns about a possible fourth accomplice. Doha informs him that she is going to Dr. Han's wife, Ha-yeon, who is filming her cooking show in a studio. Mayor Doha arrives at the studio at the same time as a hooded figure approaches her dressing room following the shoot. They dash over to discover her door locked after hearing her voice, suddenly pleading for assistance. When the others tend to an unconscious Ha-yeon, Chang-ho arrives as well and smashes through the door. Chang-ho notices the hooded figure fleeing as he gets closer to the open window. A little while later, after the police have left, Mayor Doha and Chang-ho talk to Ha-yeon regarding the dashcam footage. She initially denies knowing about the recording, but after hearing Chang-ho's explanation of the consequences of hiding evidence, she changes her mind. At some point, she identifies Gong Jae-hun, a daily newspaper owner, as the fourth accomplice. It turns out that all three of the case's suspects are Jae-hun's henchmen, who enjoy considerable popularity among the wealthy. Later, Ha-yeon gives Chang-ho the dash cam footage along with some advice, telling him to exercise caution when it comes to the individuals involved in the case. Upon reviewing the tape, it becomes evident that Dr. Han is the driver while the other two batter and threaten Dr. Seo to take down his paper. Their anger was so great that they hit him nonstop until he started talking nonstop, which did not go well. The doctor's life is finally taken by the two beating him up. Chang-ho observes as Yang talks to someone on the phone and discovers that Jae-hun's name is not mentioned once during the entire exchange. The doorbell interrupts Miho and Jae-hun as they are having dinner at home, and all three of the men there are very stressed out. Miho opens the door, thinking it's Chang-ho, only to see court executives there to take his personal belongings. When Miho picks up the phone and starts bugging Chang-ho about having borrowed money from a moneylender, Jae-hun tries to subtly warn Chang-ho about the seizure. When Chang-ho cuts the call abruptly, Miho accuses her father of being just as careless. While working, Chang-ho is investigating Jae-hun when he receives a call from Mayor Doha. Since that is the only way to get out of his current situation, he chooses not to answer the call and to work on the case only in order to get the money that is being offered to him. As anticipated, when Chang-ho returns home, Miho is shocked to see the money. She is happy about the money even though she doesn't think her husband should have been able to get such a big case out of nowhere. The two head to bed with a happy heart because tomorrow is their third anniversary. Chang-ho calls Jae-hun the following morning, certain that he will still become famous even if he loses, and that he will be wealthy if all goes well. When Jae-hun arrives at his vacation house, he is astounded by the opulent lifestyle of the wealthy. Chang-ho tells Jae-hun that based on the evidence he has uncovered in the case, he believes that Yang's source must be the main person behind Dr. Seo's demise. Chang-ho then offers Jae-hun the dash cam recording in exchange for 3 billion won in an apparent attempt at blackmail. But Jae-hun rejects him outright and does not fall for the trick. Then, Chang-ho notifies Mayor Doha that he will see to it that the dash cam footage reaches the prosecutor handling their case. Later that evening, Chang-ho sends a message to Prosecutor Cho prior to having dinner with Miho and Jae-hun to celebrate. However, as was previously observed, Chang-ho departs early and gets a coffee before heading to meet the prosecutor. While traveling, Chang-ho listens to a radio program about the enigmatic con man Big Mouse. He wishes for Big Mouse to be apprehended, so he can defend him and earn some money. At that moment, the coffee starts to take effect, and the car and the area around him start to resemble a spaceship. This eventually throws his senses and brain completely out of whack, causing him to lose control of his car and crash. He gains consciousness after several flips, and he has changed since then. Chang-ho's life flashes before his eyes as he is rushed to the hospital. He jolts awake in the hospital when Miho suggests getting a divorce, realizing that he must have left his phone in his car. He calls himself using Miho's phone, but it appears to be too late. a man seizes the phone and the dash cam footage before he can stop Chang-ho's car from being scrapped. After being released from the hospital, Chang-ho is getting ready to go when the police show up and take him into custody for drunkenness. Chang-ho, who is being held at the prosecutor's office, recalls the coffee that was offered to him and his meeting with Jae-hoon. He assumes that Jae-hoon is the one who laced Chang-ho's coffee, which ultimately causes the accident. Chang-ho asks to speak with the mayor. Then, in exchange for Mayor Doha's assistance in getting Dr. Seo freed, he offers to locate his hidden paper. Mayor Doha, however, flatly rejects his request. To Gig-wong's surprise, an investigation unit armed with a search warrant raids Chang-ho's office. After tearing down a wall, they discover a gun, multiple gold bars, and a ton of drugs. Moreover, the roof also makes a substantial amount of money available. After that, Chang-ho is moved to Gyuton Penitentiary, which has a bad reputation as the worst jail in the nation. Human rights are non-existent here, but corruption is also deeply ingrained, with some prisoners receiving preferential treatment. Chang-ho is removed from the general cells with Warden Park monitoring his progress, and he is ultimately introduced to Doctors Han, Lee, and Yang. Chang-ho eventually realizes who is responsible for his accident as a result of this. A few other prisoners beat Chang-ho up as a demonstration of their strength in the prison. Meanwhile, the news of Big Mouse's capture breaks while Mayor Doha and Jae-hoon are celebrating with their spouses at a party. Surprisingly, Chang-ho's photo is being shared as the elusive criminal along with rumors of massive sums of money, an abundance of drugs, multiple gaming ledgers, and burner phones being found. Back at the prison, Chang-ho is barely supported by a tiny seat and is severely injured. He is tied to the ceiling. He apologizes, but they don't take him seriously and nearly kill him. Jae-hoon contacts Warden Park right away after learning about the news reports in order to make sure Chang-ho escapes from prison and they can recoup the money he embezzled. This prompts the warden to dash downstairs with the medical team, who manage to revive Chang-ho. Soon and Miho are both refused entry to Chang-ho outside. Soon after, Gig-wong tells her that Chang-ho is reportedly Big Mouse. Though there are media present, Miho asks him to take her home, even though Soon suggests they head to his office. News of Big Mouse's capture begins to circulate inside the prison, even as Chang-ho is forcibly placed in a cell with multiple other inmates. He finds himself alone in a corner when he later witnesses Miho on TV addressing the press. She addresses him directly, telling him that she will fight to prove his innocence and even cautioning him not to refuse to see her again, even though she is adamant that her husband is most definitely not Big Mouse. Reminding a completely defenseless Chang-ho of his family makes him even more emotional. When the prosecutor questions Chang-ho the following day, he explains that if he had known that his office had billion-dollar hidden wealth, he wouldn't have been several months behind on his rent. During a polygraph examination, he is taken aback when asked if he is Big Mouse. The graph jumps in response to his shock, despite his strenuous denial of every claim. Mayor Doha looks convinced that Chang-ho is, in fact, the skilled criminal based on the questions he is asking. Even as Chang-ho goes back to his cell, Dr. Han, Lee, and Yang at the prison disagree about whether Chang-ho is indeed Big Mouse. Jerry, one of his cellmates, claims to be a Big Mouse fan and declares his love for Chang-ho, even though Chang-ho has denied being the criminal on several occasions. In the meantime, Jae-hoon meets with the case prosecutor after giving his accomplices strict instructions to allow him investigate the matter. Later that night, he finds out that the prosecution is now actively trying to identify Big Mouse after previously acting on an anonymous tip. Subsequently, the prosecutor goes directly to Mayor Doha and gives him Big Mouse's drug ledger, making sure the prosecutor does not possess duplicate copies of the list. He is reminded by the mayor to remain devoted to him alone. In the meantime, Miho enters the conversation and asserts that they must locate Dr. Seo's hidden document in order to understand the cause of his passing, defying Sun and Gig-wong's advice to refrain from participating in their investigation. The following morning, rumors about Chang-ho's true identity as Big Mouse are rampant throughout the prison. Some people are adamant that they have met Big Mouse, while others think he is a woman, and still others think he is connected to the mafia. Chang-ho fights with another prisoner over his identity during lunch, and the guards intervene to break it up. The warden treats Chang-ho to a delicious lunch and has him brought to the special ward. Given that they both have the same family name, the warden asks Chang-ho about his ancestors after he has had his fill. The conclusion then states that Chang-ho may be related to Warden Park, but he is relieved that he can at least consider the warden to be an older brother because he cannot address him as his uncle. He is soon asked if he is Big Mouse, so his moment of relief is fleeting. Chang-ho decides to be truthful and admits the truth, earning himself a slap and a 5-day period of solitary confinement. Feeling frustrated and alone, Chang-ho recalls the time they had to deal with a leaking ceiling at home and how Miho had stepped up to confront their upstairs neighbors with such bravery. They eventually got into a fight with them because they wouldn't mend a broken pipe, but Miho put an end to it by using a fire extinguisher. After that, they had rejoiced over receiving payment for the leak. Miho is also troubled by this memory because she misses her spouse. She applies the following morning to the Gyuton University Hospital, where she is interviewed by Mayor Doha's wife. After Miho gets accepted, Sun lets Chang-ho know that she plans to locate Dr. Seo's paper. Furthermore, he informs him that he has been unable to get assistance from Mayor Doha. In this case, Chang-ho, facing certain indictment, asks Sun to file for divorce on his behalf in order to spare Miho the hassle. Chang-ho remembers, back in his solitary confinement cell, how Miho proposed they get married while he was preparing to go to law school, refusing to end their relationship. The day he set up his office was when he had later proposed to her, and she had gladly accepted. Chang-ho chooses to end it because he is haunted by these memories. Chang-ho makes a tough decision because he is determined to prove his innocence and implicate everyone. He expresses his gratitude to Miho in a letter for being in his life. The general cell's room leader, however, persuades him to the contrary. Chang-ho then understands that he can be killed by any of the numerous criminals in the area if he simply provokes them. He picks a fight at lunch that day with Chunk, the same prisoner he had fought the day before, and challenges him to take his own life. Still, Chang-ho knocks Chunk unconscious with an unexpectedly powerful punch. His next target appears to be a psychotic death row inmate, but insulting and slapping him repeatedly doesn't work either. Rather, all of this leads to Chang-ho becoming more respected within the prison, which makes Jerry very happy. Chang-ho finds out during lunch that an inmate was murdered the night before while attempting to break free. He runs away that night after being reminded that Warden Park is the worst offender in the prison by this. Ironically, he voluntarily gives himself away, which prompts the armed guards to move toward him. The screen goes black as he purposefully resists, wanting the guards to shoot him. Chang-ho continues to try to get the guards to shoot at him when it returns, but Warden Park tells his men to stop. After the warden receives his money back from Big Mouse, Jaehoon promises him a gift and reminds him to keep Chang-ho alive. Miho's first day at Gyuton University Hospital is the following morning. She notices that the other nurses aren't too excited about the new hire after being assigned to the cancer center. Miho is left alone to handle the patient's medications while the nurses take their lunch break, which only serves to overwhelm her more. Despite her lack of experience, Miho steps up to the plate and makes sure everyone gets their medication. She arrives at the final patient and observes him experiencing a cardiac arrest. She starts CPR right away and manages to save the patient by calling for a code blue across the hospital. She is shocked to learn that Dr. Hyun-ji, the hospital's director, is reprimanding her. Later, the head nurse warns Miho to follow instructions after informing her that all of the patient's guardians on their floor had decided not to perform CPR. Miho becomes curious when she overhears a hospital executive pressuring a guardian to sign a DNR, do not resuscitate, request form in exchange for payment during her break. Later that night, when Sun and her father talk about it, they wonder if Dr. Seo's paper has anything to do with it. After that, Sun tries to persuade her to accept Chang-ho's divorce petition, but Miho rips it up and insists on seeing him straight away. Sun informs her that visits are not currently possible because Chang-ho is being held in solitary confinement. Upon perusing his ledger the following day, Warden Park discerns that he must capture a big fish in order to enhance his cash flow. In order to accomplish this, he summons the ward's inmates together and divides them into what appears to be a grade. Chang-ho finds out from Jerry that these prisoners are required to either provide the warden with a monthly bribe or comply with all of the warden's requests. Chang-ho is always expected to receive an A because No Park, his room leader, reads the warden's fortune on a regular basis. Jerry continues by saying that the VIPs don't use the grading system. When one prisoner voices his disagreement with these regulations, the guards beat him right away. Chang-ho steps in swiftly to halt the assault. He feels compelled by his inner lawyer to confront Warden Park, who reiterates that he sets the rules and recite his interpretation of the law. The greatest privilege enjoyed by Grade A inmates is the ability to help VIP inmates and win their favor, as Chunk is constantly spotted around them. Other than that, they are free to do as they please. However, Chang-ho and Jerry, along with other Grade C inmates, are treated like slaves and forced to work in the prison's unclean sewage facility. Chunk and the VIPs order Tusk, an inmate who needs money for his wife's surgery, to attack Chang-ho in the yard. The warden notices the attack the following day and calls on his men, but Chang-ho is caught off guard and deflects it. But takes extreme persistence, shows how desperate he is for money. Chang-ho learns that the VIPs did not frame him as Big Mouse when they attempt to attack him, even though the guards eventually knock him out. In an unexpected turn of events, Chang-ho is asked to pay Warden Park a monthly bribe in exchange for keeping the truth that Chang-ho is not Big Mouse a secret. Chang-ho sternly warns the warden not to harm Miho and Gig Wong when he threatens to put even them in danger because of this lie. Chang-ho decides not to bribe the warden and instead fully embraces the identity of Big Mouse, overcome by the thought that his family might be in danger. Unaware that Mayor Doha is surreptitiously watching her, Miho is questioned by the prosecutor while serving as a witness in the case. Miho offers to help locate the real Big Mouse and disputes Chang-ho's criminal status. Later, when she thinks back on their enjoyable times together, she realizes how much she misses him. Observing her from the other side of the street, Mayor Doha returns home to inquire about Dr. Seo's paper with his spouse. She brushes the topic off, saying the prison doesn't have any papers like that. Chang-ho organizes a protest against the subpar food the Grade C inmates are receiving the following afternoon. He daringly repels the guards by hurling excrement at them, hoping to make his Big Mouse impression and attracting the interest of all the prisoners. Warden Park is eventually called in by the disturbance caused by Chang-ho's persistent challenges to the guards. Chang-ho boldly demands better food for his grade, acting fearlessly as Big Mouse. The warden is forced to give in while the entire prison is watching, winning Chang-ho the respect and admiration of not just his grade, but also all the other prisoners. When Chang-ho finds out later that Sun has arrived, Sun gives an emotional Miho and Chang-ho some alone time. He gets an assurance from Miho that she won't be divorcing him or leaving him. Chang-ho is relieved to know he's not alone, and his renewed resolve drives him to identify the persons accountable for the chaos in his life. When he runs into Jerry in the yard the following day, he asks him to tell everyone inside the prison that he is willing to grant the inmates' requests. Next, Jerry is told by Chang-ho to invite any prisoners who might be interested to meet him in the chapel. Unexpectedly, No Park shows up as Chang-ho's first guest and asks for assistance in finding his only daughter. No Park reveals that he attempted searching for her on his own after the police gave up after her disappearance, but he got into a car accident that resulted in his imprisonment. The next request Chang-ho receives is from Kwang-in, a death row inmate, asking him to save his mother, who requires a bone marrow transplant. According to her medical records, she has been admitted to the cancer ward at Gyuton University Hospital, where Miho works. While attempting to locate Dr. Seo's unpublished paper, Miho converses with his colleagues. She is taken aback when the resident physicians disparage him, even though the patients and nurses still think highly of him. Eventually, the results of her investigation bring her and Dr. Hyun-ji together. Miho is asked to leave the hospital on her own volition because her husband is being falsely accused of being Big Mouse. Miho argues her case and requests to be allowed to stay until Chang-ho is sentenced. She explains that Mayor Doha brought Chang-ho into the case, which resulted in the Big Mouse incident. Her request is denied by Dr. Hyun-ji, who also disputes the existence of Dr. Seo's paper. The guardian of a patient approaches Miho as she is leaving the director's office, begging for assistance to save her husband. The head nurse calls Miho away before she has a chance to find out more. In the meantime, the VIPs bribe Warden Park with 300 million won back at the prison to prevent Chang-ho from organizing his own devoted and faithful group. The warden accepts the arrangement and promises to remain silent while the VIPs carry out their plan. Taek is moved to Chang-ho's cell with 2 other people and begs for forgiveness. While reading his note, Park cautions Chang-ho to abide by the prison regulations in order to prolong his life. The following day, Taek informs Chang-ho that he had attacked him in the hopes of getting money from the VIPs, but they had broken their agreement. The warden sees Taek later receive a knife from Chunk, though. In order to prevent Chang-ho from being stabbed more than once, Warden Park gives a guard the order to have emergency medical help ready. Then, as Chang-ho and other prisoners are assigned to work in the yard, Warden Park observes the cameras. The guards abruptly close the gate behind them and flee, indicating that an attack is likely. Chang-ho and his men arm themselves with whatever they can find after realizing the danger. A vicious duel breaks out between the 2 groups. Jerry just manages to escape being stabbed, while Chang-ho and No Park provide strong self-defense. Chang-ho challenges Taek head-to-head, but is ultimately surrounded. Just when things seem hopeless, Jerry saves the day. The VIPs talk about Kwang-in, an unexpected ally who approaches Chang-ho while brandishing a knife, as she arrives in the meantime. No Park gives himself up in an altruistic gesture, diving in front of the knife to save Chang-ho. Chang-ho eventually snaps and kicks Kwang-in away despite the mayhem all around him. The warden eventually signals the guards to break up the fight after taking in the spectacle for a sufficient amount of time. After No Park is brought to the hospital, Warden Park pays him a visit. No Park whispers something in the warden's ear when he asks why he chose to side with Chang-ho rather than live comfortably behind bars. Chang-ho, Taek, Jerry, and Kwang-in are all put in isolation in the meantime. Unexpectedly, Chang-ho and Jerry are soon freed, but not before the VIPs bemoan and caution the warden not to tell Giant about the incident, since Chang-ho was spared. Seeing his chance, Warden Park renegotiates his agreement with the VIPs in order to obtain additional funds. Miho is accused of giving a patient the incorrect amount of medication at the hospital. She is exonerated of any misconduct because, fortunately, she had taken a picture of the doctor's instructions beforehand. But given the circulating rumors about Chang-ho, this incident makes her more skeptical of the head nurse. Miho claims to have Dr. Seo's unpublished paper during a seminar. Afterwards, she confides in her father, stating that she anticipates someone will fall for the trick. That night, feeling that someone is after her, Miho flees, only to discover her father, as she had expected, waiting for her. Her strategy works, drawing Mayor Doha's attention, who gives her a call soon after. They decide to meet the following day. Chang-ho apologizes to No Park in the medical room when he returns to the prison for the trouble he caused. Concurrently, the solitary confinement inmates question why, despite appearing to be on their side, the warden hasn't released them yet. Not knowing that Taek has been discovered dead in his cell, they start blaming him. As Chang-ho leaves the emergency room, he finds out about Taek's passing. Warden Park wonders if Chang-ho is to blame. Miho meets Mayor Doha elsewhere and requests his assistance. She asks Dr. Hyunji if she is aware that the hospital is making cancer patients fill out DNR request forms. Mayor Doha disputes any involvement from his wife. Giant arrives back at the prison to see Big Mouse and is greeted by Warden Park. In an attempt to identify Chang-ho, the warden tests him and gives him until the weekend to produce the identities of 5 individuals that Big Mouse is purportedly the supplier of drugs to. Later, Chang-ho phones Mayor Doha to let him know about Giant's visit and requests his help after surreptitiously attacking a guard. Mayor Doha asks his secretary to look into Giant's connection to the prosecutor, which piques his curiosity. In the meantime, the prisoners in solitary confinement become more afraid of Big Mouse because they think they might be the next to perish. The warden releases them into the general ward as a result, where the tension only gets worse. For the first time since Chang-ho's treachery, Kwang-in confronts him over lunch, but all of a sudden, 2 more men pass out from poisoning. Chang-ho concludes that the Big Mouse may actually be closer than he initially believed as a result of this. Warden Park discovers evidence that the prisoners ingested the poison in their food while looking into the poisonings. He rushes over to Chang-ho's cell to inspect it, but much to the warden's dismay, nothing is discovered despite a thorough search. He threatens Chang-ho's life if he doesn't comply with Giant's request for the names. Giant and his friend S are told to wait until another visitor departs when they go to see an elderly person in another location. Afraid, Jayan wonders who the visitor might be. She is shocked to see it's Dr. Hyunji. What's even more unexpected is that Jayan isn't allowed to see the old man until he gets back the money he lost to Big Mouse. Rather, Jayan is instructed to back Mayor Doha when he has dinner with the Secretary General and the leader of the majority party. Obediently, Jayan and S go to the restaurant to meet General Kim, the leader, and Mayor Doha. Over dinner, there is a suggestion that Mayor Doha ought to win a seat in the upcoming general election. Although the mayor appears appreciative, Jayan is clearly uneasy about the mayor's increasing political power. Afterwards, Jayan reminds Doha that his election was initially made possible by his support. Doha responds, pointing out that during his tenure, he generated a substantial amount of money for Jayan. In order to stay away from dubious activities, he continues, he wishes to step down as mayor. S intervenes to ease the tension. Afterwards, Jayan gleefully informs Sun that it would be enough to ruin him if Mayor Doha betrayed their elder. Miho texts her father on her way home after realizing she is being followed. Sun and Gigwang set out to find her, hoping to intercept the man who is pursuing her. Miho hides in a public restroom, and they are able to capture the man, who happens to be Mayor Doha's secretary. When Gigwang shows up, he examines pictures of Jayan and the prosecutor playing golf when he returns to the mayor's office. Miho uses the secretary's phone to call him and demands an explanation. Mayor Doha leaves for Sun's office to meet Miho, carrying the ledger he received from the prosecutor. He tells Miho there that, in order to ensure her safety, he had his secretary follow her. The mayor gives her an envelope for Chang-ho when she still doesn't seem convinced. When Miho sees Chang-ho the following day, he tells him that the mayor gave him the list of names he needed. Chang-ho gives Mayor Doha a call, thanks him, and advises Miho to have faith in the mayor as an ally. Jayan and the prosecutor talk about how Mayor Doha was given a phony list in the meantime. Jayan intended to use the list to remove both Chang-ho and Mayor Doha in one blow, so he had written the names at random to see how the mayor would use it. Jayan offers the prosecutor the position of chief prosecutor in exchange for his allegiance. Additionally, he tells the VIPs inside the prison that Chang-ho received the list from Mayor Doha. Inside the prison, there are rumors that Big Mouse is killing his enemies with magic, but Chuni puts an end to them right away. Then Chuni finds out that the 3 VIPs or Big Mouse are in a bet among the prisoners over who will win. This bet, which even attracted Warden Park, involves transportation cards with a 1,000,001 maximum. The VIPs find out that Jerry is organizing the bets when they learn about the jail wagers on Big Mouse, and they have him physically assaulted by the guards. After that, he is taken to Chang-ho, who challenges the VIPs with audacity, saying that not only will Big Mouse win, but also that everyone who wagers on him will profit handsomely. Chang-ho raises the stakes by wagering the VIPs that he can provide Jayan with the desired list of names, with Warden Park serving as the dealer. Before going to the prison the following morning, Jayan meets Mayor Doha and tells him that the list he is holding is false. The mayor is forced to go directly to the jail when Warden Park doesn't return his calls. A visitor is on the way, and the entire prison chants Chang-ho's name in encouragement as he leaves. Mayor Doha shows up on time and asks to speak in private, but Warden Park declines and takes Chang-ho straight to Jayan's appointment as scheduled. Jayan and Chang-ho are given instructions by Warden Park to write down the names of Big Mouse's top 5 clients during the meeting. The warden looks at Chang-ho's list after reading Jayan's, and to everyone's surprise, the lists exactly match. Chang-ho keeps his composure and puts on a poker face. The news spreads swiftly among the prisoners, who now firmly believe that Chang-ho is Big Mouse and cheer and celebrate. Now that his identity has been established, Jayan is demanding his money back, saying fund manager Peter Hong vanished and Big Mouse was to blame for everything. Jayan discloses that Peter was captured the night before when Chang-ho is called in for questioning. During his interrogation, Peter admits that 5 years prior, he was about to lose everything when an enigmatic investor contacted him. In just 2 weeks, the investments he made for this novice yielded enormous profits, and Peter grew to admire this unidentified benefactor. He eventually rose to the position of fund manager for a sizable private placement fund, but Big Mouse's intervention caused everything to collapse. Peter acknowledges that he once met Big Mouse, but he says he didn't see or hear his face. The prosecutor then insists that this is the man he met by presenting him with a picture of Chang-ho. Jian quips that the mayor might be Big Mouse as they make their way to the interrogation. Inside, Peter considers the prosecutor's offer and is informed that he'll be safe if he does as instructed. Chang-ho arrives just in time to see Peter's insulin alarm go off. He takes a shot, starts to choke, and passes away rapidly. Due to the loss of a crucial witness, Jian begins to question Miho's assertions regarding Dr. Seo's paper, which piques Mayor Doha's interest as well. Miho recalls the hospital's volunteer program at the prison for the following weekend after her shift that day. The head nurse excuses her, but Miho is adamant about going. Dr. Koo had asked if the jewelry that Miho had designed could conceal a chip, according to the guard who had met her earlier downstairs. Miho goes up to the nurse, but she turns around. Jian invites Miho to a meeting at that precise moment. Jian greets her politely, not realizing that Mayor Doha is surreptitiously listening in. Jian offers to buy Dr. Seo's paper from Miho during the meeting, but she turns him down. Miho remembers her last visit to the prison, when she found out about Chang-ho's plan to pose as Big Mouse for his trial, when he talks about the miracle Chang-ho accomplished by revealing his true names. Miho leaves after failing to persuade her that Chang-ho is Big Mouse and calls Mayor Doha right away to express gratitude for his assistance. As Gig-wang and Sun look into Dr. Seo's life of isolation, they're shocked to learn that he wasn't alone in some of the pictures on his profile. Someone else took them. They're shocked to learn that Dr. Koo had an affair and once visited his mistress when they ask around at one of his regular haunts. When Chunk returns, Jerry and No Park are back at the prison giving the prisoners their winnings from their wager. Upon discovering that he had wagered 50 cards on Big Mouse, he emerged as the biggest winner of all the competitors. Chong settles his bet with the VIPs in the warden's office. In an attempt to gain Warden Park's favor, he offers a VIP status by exceeding the agreed commission and then goes above and beyond for a prison-wide celebration. Before departing to join the VIPs, Chunk expresses his gratitude to him, and the other prisoners refer to him as their hero. Chang-ho interrupts them as they are talking about how their case is about to go to trial and advises them to confess in order to continue living. Before he leaves, assuming the persona of Big Mouse, he makes a suggestion that there is a problem with the wine they are drinking. Chang-ho then makes the decision to demonstrate that his threats are sincere. He launches a complex attack on the VIPs with the aid of his group, causing one to be terrified by tainted wine and another to become hospitalized after electrocuting themselves in the restroom. Mayor Doha questions whether Chang-ho is really the mastermind who had everything planned out from the beginning given his dedication. Chang-ho just asks Mayor Doha to determine whether or not to continue helping him, refusing to respond. When Miho notices the head nurse at the hospital quietly taking blood samples, she follows her to the Innovation Center without making any noise. She makes out that the nurse goes into a supply room, but the head nurse isn't there when Miho gets there. Mr. Ham, a security guard, then goes with Dr. Hyun-ji to the supply room. Mr. Ham affirms that he did not see anyone else, despite Miho's insistence that she was trailing the head nurse. Dr. Hyun-ji concludes that Miho is once again where she shouldn't be as a result of this, and cautions her to stay focused on her work. Dr. Hyun-ji tells Mr. Ham not to enter the supply room again after Miho leaves. In the meantime, the VIPs at the prison discuss their fear of Chang-ho and beg Jian to assist them in avoiding the trial. Jian encounters Chang-ho en route and cautions him to avoid the VIPs in order to protect Miho. He is shocked when his wife calls to complain about white chrysanthemums, which are usually sent for funerals, that were delivered in his name. Chang-ho shows that he is capable of defending Miho both inside and outside of the prison with this maneuver. Although Jian finds it difficult to swallow this pill, Warden Park is very happy to see Jian in a somewhat helpless position. Chang-ho approaches Chunk to have an open discussion because he questions Chunk's loyalty to the VIPs. Chang-ho wagers on who will escape the jail first after Chunk says he won't betray the VIPs. A group of prisoners loyal to Chunk beat up one of the VIPs, Dr. Han, and bring him before Chang-ho in the same location where he was strung up. Considering that he was only operating the vehicle at the time of the incident, Chang-ho requests that he confess during the trial. Chang-ho gets Dr. Han to reflect about his life after he declines to respond. In the end, Dr. Han consents to confess, but Chang-ho still knocks him out by pouring a bucket of water over him. Chang-ho reminds Dr. Han of his pledge as soon as he becomes conscious again. As Mayor Doha asks for a meeting, Miho is talking with her father and Sunt about what to do next. He compares her to himself and tells her he didn't know his father had been disposing of toxic waste from his dye factory. Before it's too late, he begs her to think that her husband is actually Big Mouse. Mayor Doha tells her that even though he gave Chang-ho a list of fictitious names, Chang-ho still knew the real ones when she refuses. Additionally, he discloses that the lone witness to Big Mouse's whereabouts was inexplicably poisoned while being questioned by Chang-ho. As she keeps her faith in her husband, Mayor Doha tells her that Chang-ho has admitted to being Big Mouse himself. Miho becomes confused by the mayor's insistence and calls her father, who informs her that Chang-ho has paid back a loan totaling over 100 million won in cash. Miho then wonders where Chang-ho obtained the money. This makes her even more perplexed about the husband she has known for so long and the person he appears to have changed into. Even after arriving home, she is still lost in thought, and the only comfort she finds is knowing that she will see Chang-ho the following day while working as a volunteer with the medical staff. The prison day begins bright and early, with Warden Park reminding the prisoners to behave well when the medical team shows up. However, Warden Park is unaware that Miho will also be present. Chang-ho declines to have a medical examination. Dr. Hunji is completing the itinerary for the day prior to the group departing in the meantime. When she questions Jae-hin's wife Ashley's decision to accompany them, she is informed that she is only following their elders' orders. She requests that Ashley stay behind with Dr. Han's wife Hyun, who is going to be joining them for the special meal for inmates. When they get to the prison, the warden greets them all warmly, and one of the guards knows Miho from when she was last in Chang-ho. Chang-ho excitedly prepares to meet her after he quickly breaks the news to her. Later, when even the guard accompanying the VIP steps away at his nod, his power as Big Mouse is on display. His group of prisoners then drags the VIPs off to spend the rest of the day locked in a storage room. Chang-ho is informed by the guard at that very moment that Dr. Han's wife is also a volunteer. Jerry informs Dr. Han that Chang-ho will make sure he meets her during the day before they are locked up once more. The other two start to wonder if Dr. Han has joined Chang-ho's side because of this special treatment, but he persuades them that this is all part of Chang-ho's scheme to stoke tensions between them. When the prisoners bow to her out of respect, Miho observes Big Mouse's influence in the meantime. She accepts a guard's offer to be escorted to Chang-ho and goes with him to the VIP den. She asks if he is truly Big Mouse, warning him not to lie, but still afraid of his response. Chang-ho stays silent for a while before dragging her outside into the yard, where Warden Park cannot hear them, knowing that the warden can hear them talking. It is only then that he speaks. He claims that he was knocked unconscious shortly after receiving the list from Mayor Doha, and the list had vanished by the time he awoke. Then it dawned on him that he had a tarot card with 5 different names on it that was in his pocket. Chang-ho had asked No Park to decipher the meaning of the tarot cards he had been given after making arrangements with the guards for a new set. No Park, who insisted it was outside his area of expertise, read the card, which showed a burning tower, as a sign of calamity that would pave the way for a better future because a better tower could be constructed. Chang-ho explains to Miho that Big Mouse speaks with him through his unique deck of tarot cards, and that whatever the cards represent ultimately comes to pass when she inquires about Peter's unexplained demise. Chang-ho tells her that he received a judgment card and that he feels it is his duty to expose the truth about Dr. Ku's paper and make sure those responsible are held accountable when it appears that none of this has anything to do with her. Chang-ho had received the magician card as payment for his wish fulfillment exercise, which implied that Big Mouse had acknowledged Chang-ho's fighting prowess. Acknowledging the strain Chang-ho is under, Miho expresses regret for not believing him and demands to share the work by locating Dr. Say's paper. Warden Park wonders what they might have discussed after their disagreements have been resolved. After giving Changjek a flu shot later, Miho notices 2 distinct boxes containing blood samples with the head nurse and wonders what they might mean. A guard is escorting Hyun to meet her husband in the medical room in the meantime. Dr. Han hits her when she refuses his advances, asking if she had an affair since she hadn't returned his call the week before. As he is strangling her, she manages to say that she had left her phone in the car. When she expresses pain, realizing his mistake, He slaps himself, apologizes profusely, and tells her he will soon get medical bail. Chang-ho receives the renowned Big Mouse treatment later on during lunch. He addresses every volunteer, including the head nurse, and then congratulates Ashley on a recent award. When he arrives at Dr. Hunji, he then commends Miho's work ethic. As she is leaving the prison, Miho observes Hyen's bruises, but Hyen quickly brushes her questions aside, telling her that everything is fine. Ashley abruptly informs the group that she has planned an after-party at her gallery. She later admits to Dr. Hunji that all she really needs is a group photo to present to the elder. Miho says she has a night shift that night and would like to be excused from going. There, Jae-hin finally gets to ask the elder if medical bail can be arranged for his friends. She does this without refuting or verifying the Big Mouse rumors. She then informs her father and son that Chang-ho is Chang-ho. Mayor Doha intervenes and offers to speak with the judge when the elder responds that he doesn't have good relations with the judge overseeing the case, winning the elder over on another point. All Jae-hin can do is sigh with rage. As Miho arrives at the hospital for her shift, Kang-uk, the patient's previous guardian, calls. She informs Miho that the cross-adorned necklace contains Dr. Se's paper. She is pushed off the hospital roof and dies before she can clarify who owns the necklace. Miho walks over to Ashley's gallery, remembering that Dr. Hunji wears a cross necklace. Miho finds her in the restroom, where she informs her of Dr. Se's paper being in a cross necklace in addition to reporting Kang-uk's murder. Upon closer inspection, she discovers that Dr. Hunji's necklace is not the one she is seeking. Dr. Hunji, who is upset about being suspected, advises Miho against making snap judgments before leaving. The other person using the restroom overheard the entire conversation, which is something that both women miss. The VIPs anxiously await Jae-hin's call with updates regarding their bail, while Chang-ho leaves Big Mouse a note in the prison chapel dismissing the medical bail. In response, Chang-ho is given an inverted chariot card, which suggests he must do it on his own. Once more, Dr. Han is compelled to appear before Chang-ho, who warns him not to betray him and describes traitors as the worst kind of criminals. While Gigwang searches Sun's office for an episode of a health program on which Dr. Hunji recently spoke, Miho notifies Mayor Doha of her choice to put her trust in Chang-ho. When Gigwang eventually locates the episode, Miho discovers that Hyen wore a cross necklace during the episode as well. They quickly scan Kiang-su's designs, find a match, and deduce that Hyen is in possession of Dr. Son's paper. Hyen is recalling the incident where she overheard the conversation in the restroom and realized there was a chip in her necklace. She also remembers the night Dr. Koo had aided her in escaping Dr. Han's wrath. She had been brought to a fishing site far from Dr. Han, where Dr. Son was caring for her wounds. After the two had come to rely on one another for comfort and support in this way, Dr. Koo gave her the necklace one day, which she had vowed to keep forever. She is currently only grieving greatly over Dr. Koo's passing. Warden Park escorts her husband and the other VIPs as they get ready to leave the prison, but Chang-ho blocks their path outside. Chang-ek steps forward to take responsibility after Young says he is aware of Dr. Han's intention to confess during the trial, and all of the prisoners depart from Chang-ho's side. Subsequently, Lee declares that the warden has consented to confine Dr. Han in isolation until the trial's conclusion. It is now safe for Young and Lee to bribe the judge, without fear of anyone confessing. Chang-ho appears to be left with no choice but to watch helplessly as they leave. His laughter, though, suggests that he has other plans and that he fooled everyone. Young and Lee leave the prison after receiving tracker anklets and a strong warning from the warden. But secretly, Lee has figured out a way to give his secretary his anklet the moment Warden Park closes for the weekend. Later, Su-cha, one of the guards, gives Chunek a signal, and Chunek brings Dr. Han to the chapel so that he can confront him about his treachery. Chunek gets right to work after learning that the chapel's cameras have been switched off for the evening. Dr. Han is promptly restrained and informed that Jae-hin has mandated his penalty. At that moment, Su-cha, who supports Chang-ho, is watching the proceedings from the warden's office as Chang-ho and his group of prisoners enter the chapel. A fight breaks out between the two clans when Chunek declines to work with Chang-ho. Chang-ho meets Dr. Han in the emergency room a while later, suggesting that he saved his life. He is now able to inquire about Dr. Se's paper. Dr. Han merely advises Chang-ho to avoid the mess. Even though Dr. Han has declined to provide additional information, Chang-ho is now aware that Jae-hin has support from another person. It is evident that the fight was staged to scare Dr. Han because both groups joke around and tend to each other's minor wounds in the chapel. Chun-sik reminds Chang-ho of their wager about who will be the first to leave the prison when he finds out that he'll be released in 3 months. Sun and Gigwang discover Hyen's place is empty in the interim. When Miho hears of an emergency in the cancer ward, she asks her father to continue searching. She rushes over and tries to start CPR only to be told about the non-resuscitation order. Later, Miho overhears a discussion in the funeral parlor and discovers that both the autopsy and the burial are prohibited by the hospital's confidentiality agreement. She goes to the morgue, determined to learn what the hospital was so desperately trying to hide. After successfully obtaining a blood sample, she leaves the room only to run into Dr. Ji and the head nurse outside. Just as Mayor Doha arrives, Dr. Ji requests that Miho be searched after a search of her bag yields no results. Later, over dinner with his wife, Mayor Doha is deep in contemplation over whether or not to keep assisting Chang-ho. Meanwhile, Miho gets the blood sample from the morgue, where she concealed it at the hospital. Sadly, her elevator becomes stuck, and she starts to fear being attacked. Abruptly, a man in a mask and armed with a knife comes through the shaft of the elevator and seizes her. She strikes back at him, but he easily overcomes her. Just as the funeral hall's elevator unexpectedly opens to reveal Mayor Choi, he brutally strangles her. He follows the stranger after failing to stop him, but he is still evading capture. He checks on Miho upon his return to the elevator, and she is relieved to still have the blood sample. He follows her to give the paper to one of Gigwang's contacts at the forensic service, intrigued to solve the mystery surrounding Dr. Sei's work and promising to learn the hospital's motivation shortly. She gives him her sincere gratitude and walks away. The following day at the prison, Warden Park plans to collect costs from the prisoners for the objects they damaged during their fictitious altercation. Chang-ho offers to cover the cost instead, though. Later in the confessional, Chang-ho leaves the chariot card there as a symbol of a valiant deed for victory in an attempt to trap Big Mouse. Chang-ho thinks Big Mouse is finally revealing himself when someone enters the confessional, but it's actually No Park who tells him the warden is taking away 8 million won for the statue. Chang-ho loses track of his tarot card and is expecting a response from Big Mouse the following day. Then he recalls how Chang-ho had asked him to donate a statue that had a hidden camera inside the confessional, and how Sun had smuggled in a phone for him concealed in a book. After watching every video from the previous day, Chang-ho is startled to see Jerry holding the tarot card. Chang-ho is forced to consider how easily he disregarded the one person who has supported him throughout his imprisonment in light of this revelation. Jerry denies taking the tarot card when Chang-ho confronts him, saying he left it inside the confessional. Chang-ho sees the video again and discovers that 30 minutes are missing after dismissing him angrily. When he calls Miho, he finds out that she was given a reversed Fool tarot card and white chrysanthemums, which suggests a thoughtless deed. Chang-ho sees this as a warning because he had sent Ashley the same flowers. He can't figure out how anyone found out about the hidden camera, though. Jerry asks Chang-ho for Big Mouse's identity after realizing that he isn't Big Mouse, but he is told to keep away if he wants to survive. Somewhere, Jae-hin is summoned to Chairman Kong's private theater, disrupting a meeting to talk about the impending trial. Everyone congregates there shortly after, including the mayor and his spouse. The mayor replies that he was too busy to speak with the judge when Jae-hin asks whether he did as promised. Jae-hin then takes up the task again. A video highlighting Chairman Kong's significance to the city of Gyutan is then shown to the group. Speaking to them afterwards, the chairman says he hopes to find a worthy successor. Following Mayor Doha's departure with Chairman Ji, the others question whether the mayor is the best option. A childhood photo of the mayor and his family with Chairman Kong contradicts their belief that Dr. Ji is the mayor's only relationship with the chairman. Later on in the evening, Jae-hin and the prosecutor talk about how to find Big Mouse so Jae-hin can get the money he lost back. The following day, Jerry is visited by his younger sister at the prison, who informs him that she has found a generous sponsor for her education and the cost of their grandmother's nursing home care. This turns out to be Jae-hin's quickest route to Big Mouse. Jerry can now be released right away because his case has been dismissed. When he gets back to his cell, he shares the good news with everyone there and gives his cellmates energy drinks. While sipping the drink, Chang-ho expresses gratitude to him for his support and genuine happiness over his release. Jerry thinks back on his decision to give Chang-ho a particular drink after Jae-hyun promised it wouldn't hurt him as he departs the jail. Chang-ho, meanwhile, is experiencing intense stomach pain and is taken out in an ambulance right away. Jerry tells Miho and Gigwang to follow the ambulance when he spots them visiting. As soon as Miho learns that Chang-ho isn't being transported to a hospital, she tells her father to hurry. The ambulance is eventually blocked by Gwang, and Miho directs it to her hospital. Miho thanks Jerry, who goes by Jail, while Chang-ho is tested for possible food poisoning. Although he makes an effort to decline the money she offers, he ultimately gives in to her persistence before departing. Later, a prison guard breaks into Chang-ho's room and takes a document bearing the thumbprint of Chang-ho, who is unconscious, giving it to Jae-hyun and the prosecutor. It is discovered that the document is a bail request. In the meantime, security prevents Gwang from entering Chang-ho's room, but Miho is permitted to serve as a nurse for 10 minutes. An emotional Chang-ho questions whether their life will ever return to its previous state in the brief time they have left. Chang-ho is soon let go, and all he can think about is who made Jerry give him the drug. He fights the guards and tries to take over the car just as he realizes they are returning to the prison. But before long, he is rendered unconscious while the car travels to Jish Mental Center. After being admitted to the mental facility, Chang-ho imagines that he has found Big Mouse, but when he removes the mask, he is shocked to see his own face. He becomes aware that he is in fact restrained. Miho is given a drug injection by his immediate superior, the head nurse at Gyuton University Hospital, which renders him comatose and incapable of resisting. He eventually wakes up to a nutritious meal, but he is unable to consume it. It turns out that Jae-hyun and the prosecutor came up with this entire scheme. Chang-ho is then given a truth serum called Peace, which completely exhausts him, making sure he doesn't eat or drink anything. Jae-hyun observes as Chang-ho rejects the serum, causing him excruciating pain. His cute mouse hallucination quickly gives way to a terrifying vision of a room full of rats. Chang-ho genuinely acknowledges in his trance-like state that he is not Big Mouse, but Jae-hyun views this as a lie. Under the influence of Peace, Chang-ho faints and goes back in time to his high school years, recalling his first encounter with Miho. She offered him lunch after she got him out of hot water with her father, a police officer. This was the first time someone had defended him as an orphan, and he found a wonderful friend in Miho from that point on. Chang-ho is abruptly knocked unconscious and threatened with more Peace. In an attempt to save himself, he points to a marker on the Gal Mountain Trail as the location of where the money he is accused of stealing is hidden. This was the same trail that Chang-ho and Miho had hiked on a special day. Now that night has fallen, Jae-hyun and the prosecutor explore the area with Young and Lee in tow. The group is thrilled to discover a small trunk after they have dug around at the location marker for a while. When they learn that it only has one gold bar inside, they are confused. The remaining gold bars and cash appear to be securely hidden away in an unidentified place. Chang-ho believes that a rescue effort must be in progress after Jae-hyun returns to the mental center and discovers that Big Mouse is somehow observing him. Meanwhile, No Park and Chinook are at the prison, wondering why some inmates are randomly throwing up blood from an illness. They see Dr. Han being released on bail at that very moment. He appears to be upset about not being able to get in touch with his wife, Hyun. Gwang and Sun are looking for Hyun as well. Miho receives word from Mayor Doha that she has been found. The mayor decides to go there himself and finds the ocean empty after stopping Hyun from throwing a necklace into the water. Sun, Gwang, and Miho show up, but Mayor Doha quickly departs after learning of Chairman Kang's failing health. Hyun fiercely denies needing Miho's assistance and declines to testify during the trial, even though she can vividly recall all of the violent incidents with her husband. Dr. Ji discovers, while visiting Chairman Kang in another location, that he is under a great deal of stress due to the lack of a suitable replacement. She suggests her husband spend the night by the chairman's side when she sees him waiting outside. Mayor Doha appears desperate to kill Chairman Kang when he sees him sound asleep, but he quickly gathers his thoughts and becomes calm. A storage room at the mental center is set on fire by someone who has a tattoo on their finger, setting off the alarm. Chang-ho attacks his caregiver, who tries everything to stop him as he seizes the chance to flee. After the caretaker receives a head knock from a firefighter, Chang-ho is relieved to see that Jerry has arrived to save him. But Jerry is attacked by the caretaker, who kicks and punches him until Chang-ho stabs him with a shattered glass. The caregiver lifts Chang-ho off the ground and strangles him as he returns his focus to him. The caretaker lets go after Chang-ho pokes him in the eyes. Chang-ho charges into him out of rage, bringing him to the ground. The two dash to the basement parking lot in order to flee after seeing how Jerry is doing. When the head nurse sees Chang-ho driving off, she tells the security detail to pursue the vehicle and informs Jae-hyun, who is not impressed, of the incident. Jerry loses the security team that was following them by driving erratically through traffic. He admits to adding a spike to Chang-ho's drink and says he will fill in the rest of the details later. He apologizes profusely and requests that Chang-ho get into a different car so he can escape in the one that has been reserved for him. Chang-ho discovers a phone, some cash, and a change of clothes inside the vehicle. Jerry, meanwhile, gets stopped at a police barricade that Jae-hyun's group has set up when he drives back into traffic. Jerry smashes through the barricade with the intention of escaping, determined not to be caught. Jerry is eventually taken into custody by the police and security personnel at the barricade, and Chang-ho gets there in time to see his savior being taken away. Feeling shocked by Jerry's demise, he makes it past the barricade without getting noticed. Miho joins Sun and Gwang to talk about a live stream scheduled with an online newscaster after making Hyun an alluring offer. It becomes evident from Chang-ho's escape story in the news reports that Jae-hyun's scheme involved using Chang-ho's medical bail application to get him admitted to the mental health facility. It is now being made to appear as though he escaped during the transfer since he has lost him. Chanak is happy to learn of Chang-ho's escape, but Warden Park shows no interest. The VIPs, however, are quite worried because they think Chang-ho might make them his next target. Chang-ho, meanwhile, gets a message telling him to go to an empty hotel. He is taken aback when, despite being recognized, he is permitted to continue after being stopped for inspection en route. He is blind to the fact that the officer is covered in tattoos behind his ears. When Chang-ho gets to the message's designated hotel room, he discovers a wad of cash and a suit. Chang-ho, overcome with emotion at Jerry's defeat, resolves he will no longer play the role of pawn in Big Mouse's scheme. Upon bidding farewell to Hyun, Miho starts to ponder over how to get in touch with Chang-ho without the authorities discovering. As this is going on, Jae-hyun is talking to the VIPs about the impending trial when the prosecutor gives him a call to let him know that Miho's phone is being followed by the police. They are startled, nevertheless, to discover that Miho, Gwang, and Sun are putting on a protest in front of the prosecution's office and grabbing media attention. Miho demands an investigation into Chang-ho's kidnapping in front of the media. She turns at her phone, her father's phone, and Sun's phone so that all of their emails and call logs can be thoroughly examined. The prosecutor is compelled to comply since he must pay attention to her demands. Numerous articles regarding the kidnapping spread as Miho planned, eventually informing Chang-ho of her whereabouts. When Jae-hyun finds out that Chang-ho hasn't spoken to any of his family since making his getaway, she is shocked. Chang-ho observes from a clock tower across the street as the trio carries on their protest outside the prosecution office the day before the trial. After noticing an insurance advertisement that resembles their own lives, Miho uses Sun's burner phone to call a number, finally getting Chang-ho. He asks for her number when she tells him that Hyun has decided to assist them. When Young finds out the next day that an online newscaster is going to interview an informant regarding their case, she becomes extremely anxious. However, Dr. Han advises them to concentrate on the trial. Jae-hyun receives an unexpected proposal from Hyun at that precise moment. If Jae-hyun can persuade Dr. Han to grant her a divorce, she offers to give Dr. Son's paperwork. She also discloses that she has communicated with Big Mouse. Young and Lee review the terms after sending over the divorce papers, but Dr. Han simply refuses. Then Jae-hyun reminds him that Chairman Kong would suffer greatly if Dr. Son's paper was made public. When the dignitaries enter the courtroom, Mayor Doha discovers that Jae-hyun is aware that Hyun is in possession of Dr. Son's paper. He lets Miho know. She watches the live stream, which has attracted a lot of attention from the public, and attends the trial. The live stream and the trial start at the same time, and Chang-ho shows up there to introduce himself as Big Mouse. He offers to forecast the result of the trial. Chang-ho can foresee the outcome of the trial because he was previously appointed as the defendant's attorney and is therefore familiar with the entire plan. But this time, he also plans to reveal the corruption in the legal system. When Miho attends the trial, it is evident that all of Chang-ho's predictions, including the prosecution's evidence and Lee's counterarguments, come true. Jae-hyun eventually gives the prosecutor a signal, and he asks for a break. Mayor Doha abruptly leaves the courtroom and tells Jae-hyun that Chairman Kang will not be pleased with the attention being given to the case. Jae-hyun then learns that it is difficult to stop Chang-ho's live stream. At that moment, Hyun calls Jae-hyun from the cafe across from the courthouse, asking him to bring the divorce papers over for Chairman Kang's benefit. After that, Jae-hyun coerces Dr. Han into accepting the divorce in order to eventually get Dr. Se's paperwork back. As Jae-hyun makes his way upstairs to meet Hyun, Gwang and Sun observe from downstairs in the cafe. Jae-hyun gives the divorce papers to the prosecutor in return for the original file containing Dr. Se's paper after obtaining Big Mouse's whereabouts from her. The trial proceeds, and as Chang-ho had predicted, the VIPs are found not guilty due to insufficient evidence, and the police are called to an abandoned factory unit where they think Chang-ho is live streaming. Chang-ho maintains that the trial's conclusion does not mean that the truth can be concealed, regardless of the outcome. Chang-ho continues to reveal that the true reason for Dr. Se's death was his unpublished paper, even as the police arrive at the incorrect spot. Jae-hyun finds out he got the wrong paper at the cafe. A vehicle carrying advertisements pulls up and starts playing Chang-ho's live stream while the prosecutor and the VIPs address the press. Chang-ho announces that he will now provide unquestionable proof for the case just in time. When Jae-hyun realizes he has the wrong paper, the video cuts to him interacting with Hyun in the cafe. The VIPs and the media watch in disbelief as Hyun admits to knowing the truth. Jae-hyun's assistant intervenes to tell him they're being filmed as he begins to lose his cool. Jae-hyun destroys the camera as soon as he notices it. Chang-ho is still not done when he gets back to the courthouse. Chang-ho is seen waiting there when the truck screen is raised. He walks right up to the prosecutor and says, "I'm going to submit this new video as evidence." The prosecutor is forced to consent to a second appeal in front of the media. Mayor Doha arrives in time to stop Jae-hyun from dragging Hyun away while he is furiously dragging him. The mayor asks Jae-hyun to go in silence, telling him about the media outside. The mayor offers to drive Sun to the airport after Hyun gives her divorce papers so that the case can move forward, but not before asking Miho to meet with Chang-ho. Speaking to the media outside the courthouse, Chang-ho affirms that Jae-hyun and the prosecutor are to blame for his kidnapping. Dr. Se's case is moved to another unit after an appeal is filed just before the police are going to arrest him. After that, Chang-ho is returned to Warden Park prison. Chang-ho finds out that Jerry is still alive before departing. Sun pays Jerry a visit at the hospital and writes him a thank you note, as instructed by Chang-ho. But when a doctor with a tattoo on his wrist reads the note that was given to him and switches the notes, Jerry rips it to pieces right away. Back at the prison, Chang-ho is told by Chunnik and No Park about an odd sickness that is causing the prisoners to lose control and vomit blood. The medical staff at the prison resigned as a result of this illness. The illness only affects the model prisoners, despite the fact that this has happened previously. Later, Jae-hyun pays Chang-ho a visit and extends an offer to invest in a development project, saying it would benefit both of them. Chang-ho, amused by Jae-hyun's self-assurance, notes that advocating for investment in an area where development is prohibited merely broadens the accusations leveled against him. Jae-hyun reassures him, though, that he was unrelated to Dr. Se's demise. Mayor Doha is thinking of going with the VIPs as they wait for their meeting with Chairman Kang. The mayor meets with the chairman and gives a copy of Dr. Son's paper and the original file, assuring Dr. G that he is innocent and uninvolved in the case. The mayor reassures the elder with pride that there are no longer any threats to his legacy, much to the surprise of the VIPs. Later, when the VIPs confront him, the mayor merely brushes them off and requests that they confess to the police about their crimes. They remind him of being their accomplice and refuse to give in. It turns out that following Dr. Son's passing, the mayor did indeed speak with them. Then, By orchestrating their accident and turning it around on them, he had tried to bring an end to everything. To be more precise, he is also to blame for Chang-ho's accident, which was planned to destroy the dash cam footage, which is the only proof of his involvement. Chairman Kong destroys Dr. Sohn's paper's final remnants later that evening. Remembering his rejection of Dr. Ji at Mayor Doha's wedding, he makes a suggestion that the mayor will take over as his replacement and asks Ji for help. It is revealed that Mayor Doha was in fact the one who had previously buried the gold bars in cement when the mayor is seen opening a door that conceals the hidden treasure. He also lied to the chairman, as evidenced by the copy of Dr. Sohn's paper and its file that he possesses. Upon discovering Hyen, the mayor gave an explanation of the paper's power, stating that it would ultimately result in her untimely death. He'd offered to pay for her airfare and accommodations in New York in exchange for Dr. Sohn's paper, so as to save all the hassle. Therefore, he had it before he even told Miho that he had found Hyen. Chang-ho leaves a note for Big Mouse in the confessional early one morning at the prison, asking him to meet him the following day to discuss Dr. Sohn's paper. As he makes his way back to the cell, he witnesses several model prisoners being freed in exchange for regular work that pays more. Miho, meanwhile, is perplexed to discover that every ward patient has been inexplicably released, and she is only informed to get ready for the incoming new patients. She coincidentally finds reports of the prisoners' blood and recalls seeing distinct boxes during their volunteer camp. She is stopped by the head nurse, who requests that she see the director right away. Dr. Ji shows her the desired blood analysis report and remarks that he is aware of Miho's snooping. Miho quickly reviews the report and apologizes for going too far, but Ji insists on her resignation. As she's leaving the director's office, already formulating her next plan, she receives a call from Mayor Doha, requesting a meeting. She determines that Dr. Sohn's paper has no bearing on the hospital based on the standard blood analysis report, and the mayor appears to agree. He inquires with Miho about any information she may have received about Dr. Sohn's paper from her after she left for New York, hoping to make sure Hyen hasn't betrayed him. Miho responds negatively, suggesting that perhaps she ought to give up on reading the paper for the time being. Someone approaches the confessional in the prison and reads Big Mouse Chang-ho's letter. As everyone else gathers to pick up their medications from the hospital staff, Gwang Yin, who appears extremely sick, breaks into a shorter line to take a bottle of vitamins. When No Park gets to the head nurse's desk, she notices that his name isn't on her list and forbids him from taking Gwang Yin's vitamins. Chang-ho finds this strange, but then there's a sudden commotion as one of the prisoners passes out. Later on in the evening, Big Mouse responds to Chang-ho with the Justice Tarot card. Miho decides to pay Jerry a visit at the hospital while she waits for Big Mouse to appear, but she discovers that his bed is empty. Chang-ho turns around when he hears someone approaching and is startled to see Warden Park there. The warden claims to have given him the list of Big Mouse's actual customers, but he won't explain how he found out where to bury gold along the Gall Mountain Trail. As their meeting comes to an end, he inquires about Chang-ho's knowledge of Dr. Sohn's paper. Even after the warden reveals his tattoo, Chang-ho is still unsure that he is Big Mouse. He threatens Big Mouse to come clean or risk losing Dr. Sohn's paper through the warden. Chang-ho appears to have planned to make sure that Big Mouse suffers in the same way he did, which is why he was happy that he recorded their conversation. Jerry, who Miho meets in the interim, offers to testify in Chang-ho's impending trial. In another scene, Mayor Doha is moved to tears as he recalls the day he lost his grandfather after his car caught fire while viewing a documentary about Chairman Kang's legacy. When Jian arrives, he remarks on how the mayor and the young person in the photo look alike, but he also notes that the child passed away a long time ago. Jian bemoans Mayor Doha's eagerness to be selected as the chairman's successor, acknowledges that he was previously underestimated, and cautions him about appropriately opposing him going forward. Chang-ho calls to ask to be present at Jian's interrogation the following day, just as Mayor Doha responds that Jian is not a suitable opponent. When Kwang In runs out of vitamins, he tries to get some from his cellmate the following morning, which sparks a fight when he persists in inciting him. Later, during lunch, No Park claims that the supplements are making people fight uncontrollably, which makes Chang-ho more interested in the circumstances at the hospital. In the meantime, the head nurse advises adjusting the prisoners' medication regimens based on side effects. Rather, Dr. Han and the other VIPs ask her to keep doing as they say. Dr. G then informs them that they will all soon be fired by the board. In response, they advise her to behave like her husband and take care of the grubby jobs while staying tidy herself. That same day, Warden Park, who is going to interview prospective nurses that afternoon, is taken aback when he finds Miho's resume among them at the prison. In the meantime, Young visits Dr. G in an effort to persuade her to reconsider their dismissal, but she is advised to file an appeal with the directors directly. He assures Lee that she was unaware of the medication change when he approaches her later. To make sure everything goes as planned, they both ask Dr. Han to speak with the head nurse, but Dr. Han declines to take part because he is too depressed over his divorce. When Chun and the others notice Miho's arrival, Kwang In is irrationally shivering in the prison yard and thinking about starting a fight. When she arrives at the warden's office, the head nurse and another staff member are already there. The warden is forced to make a tough choice when they decline to collaborate with Miho and vice versa. Kwang In attacks and strangles another prisoner in the yard in the meantime. Miho is asked if she wants to work at the prison because of Chang-ho at the same time, but they're stopped when they hear an alarm go off because Kwang In is holding the bloody prisoner against him. Kwang In's wild laughter causes No Park and Chansik to wonder if he is high, even as Sukul tries to defuse the situation. He manages to injure a guard's ear so severely that it bleeds, but it takes several taser shots to take him out. Sukul calls for assistance, only to discover that he has stopped breathing. His call is answered in the warden's office. Miho arrives at the yard to start CPR, while the head nurse panics and runs to find an emergency defibrillator. When the head nurse shows up with the prison's defibrillator, she is asked to leave. But after discovering that the device is dead, Miho is forced to start CPR again in an attempt to save Kwang In's life. She gains the warden's favor for her efforts when he asks her to go with Kwang In to the hospital. The mayor assures Chang-ho during his questioning at the prosecution office that he will investigate the possibility of dropping charges in his drug case, since he had nothing to do with it. He then plays the mayor and the prosecutor the taped exchange he had with the warden. He ends it midway, though, saying the rest will be disclosed in court. He says he doesn't think Big Mouse is the warden. He then gives the device to Mayor Doha, all the while keeping a close eye on Jian's conversation. Chang-ho exposes the extortionate and belligerent behavior of the warden, recommending that the prosecution take him into custody rather than merely calling him to testify. Mayor Doha is so impressed that he gives the prosecutor instructions to get an arrest warrant as soon as possible. Afterwards, utterly entertained by the case's development, Jian requests that the prosecutor carry out the mayor's directives. As he is being led to solitary confinement, Chang-ho notices an unusual number of birds around a factory on his way back to the prison. The birds then all shockingly fall into the lake below. Miho and Sukul are taken aback when Kwang In's reports reveal the truth. Miho stealthily takes a new blood sample when she has some alone time, then gives it to someone else to be tested further. When No Park brings Chang-ho his food the following morning, he tells him about Miho's new position at the prison's medical center. As Miho arrives at work, the warden greets her and offers to give Chang-ho a release from solitary confinement in exchange for details regarding Dr. S's paper. After he departs, Miho persuades No Park to inform the prisoners about a blood test. Chang-ho, in the meantime, confronts the warden about Miho's appointment by asking to meet with him. Chang-ho decides to tell each other what they know, and Big Mouse is interested in Dr. S's paper because someone close to Big Mouse died as a result of it. The warden is then informed by him that the paper contains information pertaining to the inmate's blood. In exchange for a meeting, Chang-ho tries to convince Miho to resign right away due to the possible danger. She does, however, remind him of her significance given that he does not intend to smuggle out prisoner blood samples for independent testing. They suddenly hear the sound of the prosecutor's convoy, which is carrying a search warrant, approaching. The warden is placed under arrest by the prosecutor on charges of extortion and blackmail. Jian pretends not to know anything and asks to speak with the prosecutor when Warden Park calls him for assistance. Then it is revealed to him that the mayor may have sped up the procedure. Without any assistance, the warden is soon removed, and the prison's inmates assemble to observe. Chang-ho requests that Miho closely observe everyone to see if anyone appears shocked or incensed about the arrest, as they might be Big Mouse. The warden's safe is soon after taken. along with a ton of other evidence. Chang-ho is invited to meet with the acting warden later on. To Warden Park's surprise, the prosecutor shows the recording of his talk with Chang-ho and then says that Sukul, who will be taking over as interim warden, sent it to him. Chang-ho is informed that he can only be completely trusted if he captures the real Big Mouse after thanking Mayor Doha for his assistance. After work, Dr. G takes a sip of her coffee and gets extremely uncomfortable. Her vision becomes blurry, and she swerves into oncoming traffic. Chang-ho tells Miho that it can't be an accident when the mayor hears the news and races to the hospital. He goes on to say that it's possible their plan succeeded in hitting both Mayor Doha and Big Mouse. Chang-ho and Miho have been suspicious of the mayor ever since Giant admitted that he was not the fourth accomplice. They have also discovered that the mayor falsified the blood analysis report in order to obtain a normal one. It was also a ruse to get Big Mouse to attack him when he asked to see the mayor during his interrogation. Having started with Dr. G's mishap and now focusing on the mayor, Big Mouse will require Chang-ho's assistance, which will require him to come forward. Chang-ho intends to eliminate them both at once in this manner. As the police are leaving the hospital with Dr. G's blood sample, Mayor Doha arrives. Later on, Giant joins the prosecutor and finds out about Dr. G's blood report while the mayor is checking on his wife. He calls the chief editor of his newspaper right away and tells him to keep reporting that drugs were discovered in the blood test. The prosecutor is then informed by him that all that is left to do is wait patiently for them to capture Big Mouse and Mayor Doha. The following day, Sukul formally assumes the role of warden and ends Warden Park's bribery and grading scheme. He promises complete secrecy and announces the installation of suggestion boxes throughout the prison. After talking with Chang-ho about finding Big Mouse's goons inside the prison, Sukul searches every prisoner thoroughly in search of a tattoo that corresponds with the symbol on the tarot cards. After clearing the majority of the inmates, he eventually finds the tattoo on 3 of them. Later, when talking with Chang-ho, he remarks that more people had to be involved because Warden Park could not have needed the assistance of just 3 prisoners. Expecting a disagreement, Chang-ho tells Sukul of his power both inside and outside the prison and maintains that the 3 prisoners shouldn't be subjected to torture in an effort to extract more information. Instead, he recommends keeping a close eye on their communications. Meanwhile, after giving Hyen the sample of Kwang Yin's blood earlier, Miho gets a call from her informing her that the medication in his blood has caused his white blood cells to triple, just like the patients in the hospital's cancer ward. As Miho begs her to come back to Korea as soon as possible, someone takes several pictures of Hyen. Subsequently, Kwang Yin becomes unruly, and Miho has to deal with him. She sedates him and gives him his prescribed medications. She later meets Chang-ho to talk about the fact that the hospital is undoubtedly prescribing various medications for the prison's model inmates. Chang-ho meets No Park to confirm bringing about 5 or 6 model inmates for a blood test each day after she pledges to learn more about their work release, which involves cleaning neighboring public areas. In another instance, Dr. Han is told to continue pursuing Hyen after receiving pictures of her from a contact who is based overseas. As Giant has made sure, Dr. G is uneasy about the media attention her case is receiving in the interim. Later, thinking to himself, Mayor Doha concludes that, based on the attack on his wife, Chang-ho must have changed his allegiance. Additionally, he deduces that Dr. Essie's paper must be the reason Miho joined the prison staff, and he promptly assigns his assistant to find Hyen. In the meantime, Warden Park, a prisoner who SUA betrayed to obtain his position, returns to the prison. He slaps him, and the man attacks him back. SUA lashes out violently before giving the order to gather and torture the 3 Warden Park minions. SUA queries whether Big Mouse is also incarcerated with them. SUA becomes so enraged at Warden Park's response that he tries to kill one of the prisoners until Chang-ho saves him, claiming that none of them, including himself, had ever met Big Mouse. Chang-ho, unimpressed by SUA's use of torture, convinces him to back down and brings Warden Park to the hospital, where Miho attends to his wounds. Though Warden Park later declines to betray Big Mouse in order to join Chang-ho, he does thank them both for their assistance. As a grand welcome to the other side, his cellmates attack him once more when he gets there. When her curiosity finally gets the better of her, Dr. G and the head nurse go to the underground lab. She appears traumatized by what she discovered there and asks Mayor Doha to take her home as she makes her way back a little later. She claims that she has never been to the lab before and demands that he not be affected by its information as they travel. He agrees to stop inquiring about what she saw there as a result, threatened that he might not be given the opportunity to assume full control as the prison warden the following morning. SUA persuades Mayor Doha to allow him to handle Chang-ho in his own manner in order to prevent Big Mouse from leaving. Upon receiving permission, he tells all of the prisoners that Big Mouse's team members, including Warden Park and his goons, are tattooed. To Chang-ho's dismay, it is even revealed that the real Big Mouse is incarcerated in addition to the fact that he is a fake. SUA then offers a special pardon to anyone who assists, putting emergency procedures in place throughout the prison until they apprehend Big Mouse. The prisoners quickly corner Warden Park to get the truth, and when Chunick intervenes to defend Chang-ho, they start to doubt Chang-ho's sincerity. Chang-ho thanks him before hurriedly approaching SUA in the warden's office. But when the mayor won't talk to him, he understands that this is now a race to catch Big Mouse. The prison's atmosphere quickly degrades as a result of frequent searches for contraband and the horrible food provided to the prisoners. This leads to fights between the various prison gangs, which No Park fears will soon turn into a riot. Given that Warden Park is still being harassed and attacked inside the prison, he even worries about his safety. Warden Park continues to assist Miho in getting blood samples from the mannequin prisoners in spite of this. One day, Chang-ho is watching from the warden's office when a group of prisoners brutally attacks Warden Park. Chang-ho walks away without looking back because Warden Park declined to accompany him. Hyan is picked up by Miho from the airport in the meantime, and neither of the women realizes that Dr. Han is pursuing them. Gwang and Sun are getting ready to learn more about the model inmate's work release in another location. They choose to hold off to avoid drawing attention to themselves as they follow the prison convoy, but they unintentionally miss a turn. The prisoners are transported to a basement facility via a service lane. Miho promises to return later that evening and departs from the lodging Hyan reserved. Information regarding the accommodations under Miho's name is discovered by the mayor's assistant. When Hyan notices that Dr. Han is there, she is startled and flees, arming herself with a kitchen knife. Dr. Han keeps coming to her and pleading with her to stab him when this doesn't deter him, and he becomes overly emotional. When Hyan tries to flee, he draws her in close, causing blood to spill onto the ground. One of the model prisoners tells Miho that she has lost a lot of weight, which has been causing her to get dizzy on a regular basis. When Warden Park discovers that Chang-ho is feigning to collaborate with the mayor and hasn't actually betrayed Big Mouse, he is taken aback. Chang-ho asks Big Mouse to meet at the chapel that evening as a last-ditch message delivered through Warden Park. Jerry asks his doctor to process his discharge while he is in the hospital. When the mayor gets to Hyan's house, he finds her corpse in the center of the house, and Dr. Han appears shocked. Dr. Ji, on the other hand, is en route to an auction where June and his spouse Ashley intend to surpass the mayor and his spouse in order to win over the chairman. They are all surprised when Dr. Ji enters the room with Chairman Kong and gives the order to clear the space for them, even though they all thought the chairman would fire her because of her drug case. As Mayor Doha reads through Hyan's messages to Miho, he finds out that he has been duped and that blood samples are being tested. He gives Sukul the order to kill Chang-ho and Miho that evening when he calls him right away. Chang-ho waits at the chapel while Miho carries on with her work, unaware that their lives are in danger. A message asks him to proceed to the VIP den. Sukul's plan is implemented in the interim. The poor quality of the food the prisoners are given causes the prison to explode in violence. A prisoner who is loyal to Sukul is subtly given a key card by a guard, which gives the prisoner access to other inmates' cells and sparks a full-fledged riot. The guards find it more and more difficult to keep the prisoners under control. Chunick gives his guard a gun and tells his group to stay put to avoid trouble. In an attempt to guarantee that Miho perishes amid the mayhem of the riot, Sukul gives his men orders to corner her in the medical room. Soon after the power to the prison is cut off, Chang-ho feels that someone has joined him. He's shocked to learn that No Park is actually the Big Mouse after using a lighter to improve his vision. Miho texts Hyan, letting her know that the power outage might cause a delay in their meeting after failing to reach her. With a casual demeanor, Mayor Doha asks to reschedule for the following day as his assistant proceeds to clear the crime scene. When an alarm goes off in the prison, and armed guards rush to the rioting inmates demanding to see Sukul in the VIP den, Miho doesn't have much time to think about the cryptic response. Normally happy No Park has changed into Big Mouse, who reveals his identity by describing the tarot cards he used because Warden Park was unable to do so earlier. Chang-ho appears content with the reality. He is reassured by No Park that he had nothing to do with Mayor Doha, who had appointed him to represent the VIPs in court but had ultimately forced him to adopt the identity of Big Mouse in order to save his own life. He explains his interest in Dr. Seo's paper by stating that he no longer trusts the law, and that's why he wants to personally prosecute those responsible for his daughter's death. Chang-ho, not wanting to be totally powerless, makes a surprising offer to No Park. However, No Park quickly sends Chang-ho to the emergency room after realizing that Miho may be in danger before responding to him. While visiting Kwang-in, Miho receives a call from her husband pleading with her to depart the prison immediately. Kwang-in tries to break free from the handcuffs, holding him to the bed as soon as she leaves his ward. As Miho arrives at the medical room, she quickly gets the blood samples and heads out, only to discover that the access door is locked. Chang-ho is ambushed by Sukul's guards as he gives her the advice to hide in the medical room. In the ensuing altercation, he defends himself while Miho blocks the door to the medical room. Chang-ho fights the guards despite being outnumbered until Chanik and a few other people step in. Chang-ho gets a chance to speak with Miho as they deal with the guards, and she prepares a sedative to use against any intruders. Chang-ho is then led by Warden Park and No Park via a detour to the emergency room. As Miho subdues one of her assailants in the meantime, another breaks through the door. He looms over her with a knife as she attacks him with a fire extinguisher and is knocked down by another. When the attacker is about to be shot by a guard, Kwang-in steps in and tries to murder him. Unexpectedly, he stands back up to continue saving Miho until Sukul shows up at the emergency room. Kwang-in attempts to defend Miho once more but is quickly rendered incapable while she attends to his wound. As Chang-ho gets closer, Sukul turns to fire at him. Chang-ho attacks Sukul out of sheer terror of losing his wife, but Miho begs him to stop. Warden Park puts an end to Sukul's life at Ashley's gallery, and Chang-ho is relieved to find her unharmed. Chairman Kong and Dr. Ji question Jayan about his publication breaking the news of her test results first. Jayan assures everyone that his actions will be vindicated in due course and denies any intention of impeding Mayor Doha's pursuit of Big Mouse. The chairman offers to protect Dr. Ji when the mayor joins them, enabling Mayor Doha to pursue his investigation without worrying about Big Mouse taking revenge. Then, Dr. Ji asks to take over Dr. Son's previous position as commissioner of the audit committee. The chairman concurs despite Jun's objections, valuing her involvement in the company. Jayan questions Dr. Ji's abrupt change of heart and advises her not to cross him after the chairman leaves. Mayor Doha reacts angrily, but Dr. Ji leaves after cautioning Jayan about the approaching end of his heyday while controlling her husband's rage. Chang-ho places No Park in handcuffs in the prison's medical room, which is currently manned by guards. Then, after making Jayan an offer, he calls her, which eases his ire. Mayor Doha attempts to visit Sukul but is unable, so he goes to the prison himself. There, Warden Park informs the guards outside the medical room that Chang-ho and Miho are in his custody. Police backup led by Jayan arrives at the prison after the mayor. The prosecutor then lets the guards know that Big Mouse is inside the jail and requests that he be let out since they plan to arrest him right away. It is revealed that Chang-ho's earlier offer to No Park was a ruse to get him arrested so he could use that leverage against the people responsible for his daughter's death. The guards move aside, allowing them to pass through, and the prosecution team takes No Park away. In exchange for Chang-ho betraying the mayor, Jayan accepts the blood samples from Miho, who she mentions served as bait to catch Big Mouse. Jayan is grateful for Chang-ho's assistance. Jayan manages to have all charges against him dropped by the prosecution. Chang-ho, now hailed as a hero for apprehending a high-profile criminal, reunites with his family at the newly opened legal practice he co-owns with Sun to celebrate his freedom. It becomes clear from their conversation that the blood samples they gave Jayan are from Chang-ho, No Park, and Warden Park, but the real samples from the model prisoners are safe. But when Miho suggests that Hyen might be gone, Gwang becomes concerned for her well-being. Chang-ho chooses to represent Big Mouse in an attempt to counter the attacks he is facing. He meets Mayor Doha en route to the press conference he organized. Declaring that he was the one who pulled Chang-ho into this mess, he challenges the mayor. Jian meets with the chairman in the interim and receives his blessing for capturing Big Mouse. Chairman Kong, who is pleased with Jian's efforts, offers to give Jian full control of the publication by transferring his shares. He goes to sign the contract, but Dr. Ji stops him in his tracks. She alerts them to Chang-ho's press conference, just before he announces that he is representing Big Mouse, in an attempt to trigger Dr. Seo's downfall. He even makes vague allusions to a significant character, who is still at large in the case, but is still hidden. Chairman Kong rescinds his gift in a fit of wrath after learning that Chang-ho will shortly be requesting Big Mouse's bail and requests that Jian return once the work is completed. Jian, on the other hand, questions Dr. Han about Hyen's whereabouts, but receives no response. She tells her father about her worries and that she will be going to look into the location of the model inmate's work. Chang-ho remains behind to handle Jian, while Gwang and Sun depart in search of Miho's assistance. Then, Jian gives Chang-ho the chance of a lifetime to become a member of the chairman's family in exchange for his assistance in getting the money that Big Mouse stole. Now in control, Chang-ho insists that Chairman Kong personally make the offer in its place. As Miho gets there, she notices Kwang-in among the prisoners who are waiting, appearing uncomfortable. She can only watch them approach a tunnel from a distance before it closes. Inside, Kwang-in keeps fighting as the prisoners make their way to the subterranean facility. A few prisoners can be seen staggering out of the tunnel as Miho is startled by a sudden explosion that soon follows a deep rumbling through the ground. Disregarding her father's advice to wait for him to arrive, she heads into the tunnel with the intention of finding Kwang-in. She eventually finds him among the rubble of the recently created crater in the ground after assisting a few prisoners to safety. She carefully makes her way across, gives him a hand up, and they start to leave. A little while later, Chairman Kong is informed by Mayor Doha that no one has been injured in the accident. The chairman, who is friendly with the head of the research center, mentions the inherent risks associated with NF9. Chairman Kong had continued to pursue a patent application in spite of the warning, disregarding the potentially catastrophic nature of the material. The chairman is ignorant, though, that the friend he had was the grandfather of Mayor Doha, who had tragically perished in a fire some time ago. Mayor Doha has since made every effort to become prosperous and strong enough to pursue justice in the future. He now asks Chairman Kong to grant Big Mouse's release on bond, promising to personally handle the matter appropriately. In the end, No Park receives a $3 billion conditional bail that comes with an electronic anklet and house arrest. Unexpectedly, Chang-ho follows him to his restaurant, which is sporting Big Mouse's sign. The person who persuaded No Park to save him is then asked to meet with him the next evening. Not too long after his departure, No Park's life tragically ends in a huge explosion. At the same time, Mayor Doha informs the chairman that Chang-ho is still alive and Big Mouse has passed away. Chairman Kong is under the mistaken impression that Chang-ho will no longer pose a threat. Nevertheless, Mayor Doha uses a hired hand named Waterfowl to place a target on Chang-ho's back in an effort to eliminate him and make sure he doesn't stand in his way later. Chang-ho, in the meantime, recalls his pledge to No Park to never give up on the case. Waterfowl is secretly following him as he makes his way back to No Park's restaurant. As he looks around the wreckage, a crazy waterfowl attacks him out of the blue. Chang-ho, fighting against being overwhelmed, is spared when an unknown person knocks Waterfowl unconscious. Soon after, Jerry shows up, assuring him that Miho is safe while being driven to a hotel managed by Big Mouse's group with Gwang. Chang-ho then goes with Jerry to Big Mouse's funeral, where a number of the organization's key players are present. There, Chang-ho sees Warden Park and finds out that he was just given bail. Then a video appears in which No Park appoints Chang-ho as the new Big Mouse and transfers his authority to him. Chang-ho is stunned to hear the news and even more taken aback when Warden Park claims he staged the video. Unexpectedly, Sun acknowledges that he filmed the video, demonstrating its veracity. Then he inquires as to Chang-ho's readiness to take on his new role. Chang-ho confronts the group and makes his choice while still struggling with the realization that his friend is associated with Big Mouse. When Mayor Doha discovers that waterfowl appears to have died accidentally, he is forced to consider whether Chang-ho is responsible. Later, when Chang-ho and Sun are alone, he confronts his friend and admits that he begged Big Mouse to save his life, accusing him of being used the entire time. Sun asks Chang-ho to clarify his choice and begs him not to give the other members any reason to doubt his intentions. Chang-ho leaves for the hotel the following day, where Gwang and his wife are waiting for him. Gwang is all for wrapping up matters pertaining to Big Mouse when he asks for their advice on whether to drop the case. However, Miho is adamant that they carry it out for the benefit of the patients who lost their lives. Chang-ho notifies Sun that he has accepted the role of Big Mouse, expressing his agreement with her. He intends to bring down the perpetrators of No Park's daughter the following day. Sun fills him in, stating that she was a freelance journalist in the past who vanished while investigating Chairman Kong's private investment on his behalf. Her notebook mentioning Dr. Koo and his paper was the only thing discovered 3 years later. Dr. Koo reportedly passed away shortly before being questioned, and although Peter Hong was Big Mouse's spy, he fled with the forum's money and had to be silenced before disclosing the organization. Chang-ho's concern about being observed at the mental hospital is cited by Sun, who explains that Warden Park had bugged Giant's phone to find the location of the gold bar's burying. As Big Mouse's first official order, Chang-ho requests a comprehensive inquiry into all aspects of Chairman Kong's past. A few days later, Jerry gives them an update on everyone connected to Chairman Kong and emphasizes how important a figure he is in Jin City thanks to his numerous businesses. By bringing up the unusually high cancer rates in the city, Miho suggests they take him down and focus their attention on NK chemicals. Then, remembering the incident involving the burst pipes in which she saved Kwang Yin, Miho asks her father, Gwang, if he looked into it. He allays her worries, saying the pipes weren't a threat, but rather a component of a fish farm. As Dr. G continues to read through the chairman's private business reports, her anxiety increases. Later that evening, during a tense dinner with Chairman Kong and her husband, she proposes closing the chemical company. The chairman walks away, infuriated by her extreme viewpoint. Dr. G, by herself with her husband, shares her anguish and sorrow over the terrible deaths brought on by NF9. She is shocked to learn that her husband is telling the truth about Dr. Seo's passing and even tells her about the agreement he had to make with Chairman Kong in order to get permission to marry her. He also assures her that he has never regretted their union. Back at the hospital, a while later, a determined Dr. G instructs the head nurse and the head of security to get rid of the underground lab immediately. Miho finds out that the lab has been destroyed early the following morning. Dr. G goes to the chairman's place, where everyone expects her to be reprimanded for her hasty decision, even as she supervises the disposal of its waste, thus eliminating all the evidence that could be used against her. She can now covertly construct a new one in its place, she explains calmly, adding that the lab had become an easy target since Dr. Seo's paper was no longer a secret. Giant is not pleased with her ability to win over the chairman. She then asks to be given Chairman Kang's publishing shares for Giant. When Mayor Doha thanks his wife for her actions as they are leaving, she tells him that she hasn't regretted being his wife either. A while later, after his cooling swim, he is ambushed by 2 men in the shower. His arm gets hurt, but he holds them off and eventually defeats them. A newly freed Chunk, meantime, enters a brand new, closed restaurant to greet Chang-ho and his group. Jerry breaks the news of Warden Park's attack on the mayor, but not before he is offered the place as his own. Later on, Chang-ho finds out that Warden Park has acquired a junkyard and the support of a local gang. When Sun reminds him that Warden Park is one of the organization's members who does not yet trust him, he becomes enraged and sets out to prove why he is the organization's second most important member, behind Big Mouse, with the help of Jerry and Chunk. After knocking the warden out, Sun puts him in a car and gives it a kerosene injection. Only Chang-ho's call stops Sun, whose cold indifference contrasts sharply with his previous demeanor. Chang-ho then meets with a very shaken Warden Park, telling him that he has planned a retaliation and that he has no interest in leading the group in the future. The following day, Miho searches through old articles concerning the NF9 invention at the library. After Gwang and Jerry join her, she soon finds out about the passing of Mr. Cho, the lab director, in the news. Jerry does some research and discovers that Mr. Cho's grandson tragically drowned in a river, while his son was imprisoned for unlawfully disposing of waste from his dye factory and died shortly after. Afterwards, Miho visits Mr. Cho's brother-in-law at a nursing home, where she finds an upset elderly man who is grieving for his grandson, Doha. When Miho encounters Gwang after realizing Mayor Doha's name, he affirms that the mayor is the elderly man's protector. The mayor then reminds her of their conversation in which he revealed to her that his father was a dye factory owner. As Mayor Doha leaves the hospital, the media goes crazy. To everyone's surprise, he declares that he intends to join a political party and run for the National Assembly instead of running for mayor once more. Next, Chang-ho invites Jayan over and asks Sun to set up a press conference. Chang-ho unexpectedly announces his independent candidacy for mayor during the press conference. Later, when they see Jayan, Chang-ho requests his help. Jayan is already at odds with the mayor and his spouse, so when Chang-ho insists on meeting with the chairman, Jayan becomes even more intrigued. They see Mayor Doha there as soon as they go to the chairman's place. Chairman Kong is graciously introduced to by Chang-ho, and Jayan and the mayor are waiting impatiently to hear his remarks. Remarkably, Chang-ho flips the script by asking the chairman for assistance. He claims that a new big mouse has taken control of the company and is using blackmail to exact revenge on No Park. Then, he candidly informs the chairman of the link between Dr. Seo's paper and No Park's daughter's death. Chang-ho makes his most audacious demand, becoming the mayor of Gang, and swears to use his newfound authority to advance the chairman's interests. He even shows a portion of the membership list of the group, claiming that there are many more in the entire city. The chairman suggests that he is willing to trust Chang-ho because he is intrigued by his manner and extends an invitation to him and Miho for their upcoming birthday. After thanking Jayan for his assistance outside, Chang-ho chooses to repay him by telling him that Big Mouse never stole their 100 billion won. The money, he suggests, is closer than Jayan realizes. Miho visits Kwang-in in prison in the interim to inquire about his well-being. She tells him no when he asks if her nose or gums bleed. He asks her to stay away from the scary people who are behind the work of the model inmates and won't tell her anything about it. He asks her to check on his siblings to see if his mother received the bone marrow transplant she had been waiting for before he leaves. Later, after finding their address in an unexpectedly fancy building, Miho and her father are turned away from the building and are made to wait in the basement. When Miho finally spots Kwang Yin's siblings, he's shocked by his brother's unexpected lack of response. Miho finds out that their mother has died by talking to the sister instead. The sister also begs Miho to never return before departing with her brother to another location. Chang-ho, Jerry, and Sun realize they are being followed as they make their way to Chung's restaurant. Chang-ho, having decided to accept the tale, enters the restaurant and is welcomed by all of the patrons, including Warden Park. The mayor gives his assistant instructions to find them, and she quickly sends him a video in response. After talking with Chang-ho for a while, Warden Park departs the restaurant and receives an invitation to meet Mayor Doha. The mayor shows Warden Park the list of members he had provided and tells him about Chang-ho's meeting with the chairman. After that, the two decide to work together to defeat Chang-ho. Remaining at the assisted living facility, Miho and her dad endeavor to obtain additional details regarding Mr. Cho's grandson from his brother-in-law. He identifies Doha, one of the young boys in the picture, as his grandson, and Sunhun, Mr. Cho's grandson, as the other boy. Additionally, he attests that his grandson was the one who perished by drowning. Afterwards, Chang-ho begins to suspect that Mayor Doha, who is actually Sunhun in disguise, has been working with Chairman Kong to exact revenge, particularly in light of Mr. Cho's apparent death as a result of his warnings about the dangers of NF9. As Chairman Kong is completing his will, he receives word that his son has sent him a gift from the United States. Throwing it out right away, he remembers the scary paintings his son used to create. Even after he passes away, he gives his assistant strict instructions not to allow him to return to Korea. Chang-ho tells Warden Park about Mayor Doha's identity theft, and Warden Park is given the go-ahead to discreetly retrieve Mr. Doha from the nursing home. Chang-ho insists that they have to trust him before he can trust them back when Jerry asks if he should go with Warden Park. Jerry follows Warden Park nevertheless, and he witnesses him retrieve Mr. Doha from the assisted living facility. But soon after, he is struck from behind and left trapped in the trunk of one of Warden Park's vehicles. Miho and Chang-ho prepare to head out for the chairman's birthday in the meantime. Miho gets a call from Warden Park asking her to get to the party alone. Chang-ho tells her Jayan will assist her. Warden Park is calling from an abandoned swim club. Jayan greets Miho, proving him correct, and she shows up just in time to see Chairman Kong arrive at the festivities. Jayan then introduces Miho to the chairman, and Mayor Doha receives word from Warden Park that Chang-ho will shortly meet his end. Later, as Chairman Kong is deep in conversation with Miho, Mayor Doha abruptly receives a call and hastily exits the celebration. He sees Chang-ho restrained and at Warden Park's mercy when he heads over to his assistant and joins a video call. Jerry, in the meantime, succeeds in opening the trunk and steps outside to discover Chang-ho's vehicle inside as well. Jerry tries to call Chang-ho and eventually tells Sun about Warden Park's treachery, while Chang-ho tries to convince Warden Park that Mayor Doha is to blame for No Park's demise. After that, Chunk gathers his men and Big Mouse's group, and they all pile into cars to save Chang-ho. Jerry arrives just as Warden Park, who is still observing Mayor Doha, points his gun at Chang-ho and fires. Jerry returns outside after deftly taking out a couple of opponents. As all of this is going on, Dr. G locates her husband and leaves the party with the chairman. Jerry informs Miho of Chang-ho's purported death and of Warden Park's cooperation with the mayor. Miho, overcome with grief and rage, lunges at Mayor Doha, but he doesn't seem to be fazed and just brushes her off. While Miho faints, Jayan rushes to her, and the truly evil mayor laughs maniacally at his success. When he arrives at Warden Park, they talk about how patient the mayor has been since he was a young boy, all in the name of retaliation. Unbeknownst to the mayor, the chairman is privy to this conversation and observes Mayor Doha's contradictory reality. What's even more startling is that Chang-ho is sitting right next to him, fully conscious. After promising Chang-ho everything in exchange for keeping this huge secret a secret, the chairman has his secretary call Mayor Doha. Chang-ho races to the hospital shortly after Miho is admitted. Once conscious, relieved to see him there, she quickly moves past her feelings and demands to know the whole truth. Chang-ho clarifies that everything, including Warden Park's fake shooting, was a ruse to trap the mayor. Chairman Kong chats with his secretary regarding his friend Mr. Cho as he waits for Mayor Doha. Mayor Doha, who takes over as secretary without the chairman's knowledge, learns of his guilt over killing his own friend and his fear of the NF9 truth coming to light. Speaking of asking for forgiveness, the chairman starts to feel pain in his chest. The mayor shows up and expresses his presence by subtly implying that the chairman is in pain with the tainted drip that is attached to him. Mayor Doha is adamant that his family's loss was far worse. Following the chairman's death, his secretary opens the safe and receives instructions from the mayor to have his will notarized and carried out exactly as written. Everyone is gathered at Chunk's restaurant the following day when they learn of the chairman's unexpected death from heart failure on the news. Jayan, who goes to the funeral with Ashley, doesn't like that Dr. G and Mayor Doha are the main mourners. Ashley tells Jayan to pay his respects so that he doesn't make a scene, and Dr. G becomes enraged at his persistent stubbornness. Afterwards, he talks to the VIPs about the chairman's inheritance. Everyone believes that his murderous son would not be on the list, but they disagree as to whether Dr. G would be the preferred replacement. A little later, Chang-ho arrives at the funeral home with the organization's members, and the group witnesses something of a spectacle. He pays his respects, introduces himself to the mayor as Sun-hun, and then whispers that he knows his deeds and that he will tell the truth. Miho is brushing her teeth in the meantime when she sees blood, and she is instantly reminded of Kwang-in asking if she had issues with her gums or nose bleeding. She confronts the possibility that she may have come into contact with NF9 while rescuing Kwang-in when her nose begins to bleed as well. Dr. G questions her husband about why he was given a different name after Chang-ho departs. Mayor Doha merely tells her that he'll explain it to her later, maintaining his act. As Chang-ho has abruptly lost the chairman's support, The VIPs debate whether he will actually not be appointed mayor. After quietly leaving them, Jian goes with the prosecutor to meet with the chairman's attorney, Attorney Young, and requests to view the will beforehand. Jian discovers that each person received an equal portion of Chairman Kong's inheritance. He tries to buy the attorney off to alter the will, but he gets rejected. Following the lawyer's departure, Jian laments the estate's apparent equitable distribution but is comforted by the prosecutor, who assures him that his worry about the mayor manipulating the will to obtain a larger share was unfounded. Jian cuts Chang-ho off when he calls to discuss the impending election, telling him that since the chairman is no longer in office, he should handle it himself. Later, in the parking lot, Jian suffers the consequences of this sudden change when he is frightened by Chang-ho himself as well as a group of Chang-ho's men. Jian is a little taken aback to hear from Chang-ho that the chairman did not suffer a cardiac arrest, as he had initially assumed he would be kidnapped. This suggests that Jian may have second thoughts following the reading of the will. Chang-ho tells him not to get in touch with him later because he broke their trust. Jian bids Chang-ho farewell, certain that nothing of the sort will occur because he has already witnessed the will. When he is by himself, he rejoices over obtaining a 36% stake in NK Chemical. Unaware that Chang-ho and the others are also watching, everyone assembles at Ashley's gallery later for the reading of the will. Jian and the VIPs intend to work together to remove Dr. Ji and Mayor Doha. Attorney Young ends the meeting by silencing everyone before starting. Attorney Kim, his associate, introduces himself as the chairman's attorney. Mr. Young explains that Chairman Kong had drafted a new will a week prior to his untimely death in response to Jian's objection. According to the reading of the will, Dr. Ji has been left the chairman's shares in Jian's publication along with a few other companies. Furthermore, Mayor Doha receives shares of NK Chemical and a number of other comparable subsidiaries, shocking Jian and the VIPs. The mayor and his wife are getting ready to leave as they examine the will themselves and bemoan their losses. An enraged Jian stops them, accusing him of interfering with the will. It's Attorney Young who stops him from attacking. Gig Wang, observing the mayhem, comes to the conclusion that Chang-ho was correct when he assumed responsibility for the chairman's death. The mayor now owns NK Chemical. Miho gets a call at that very moment from the hospital where she was admitted, asking her to come in for a checkup because the results of her blood test were not good. Jian is left alone to vent his rage, while Mayor Doha and Dr. Ji quietly return home from the chaos they left behind. Jian calls Chang-ho after the reading, even though Chang-ho has warned him not to get in touch. Jian is forced to personally come over and offer his assistance in the mayoral race when Chang-ho ignores the call, further exacerbating his desperation. After learning of Mayor Doha's assumed identity, Jian is certain that he can remove him from office once he tells the NR Forum members the truth. In exchange for becoming mayor of his own city, Chang-ho offers to assist in the legal removal of Mayor Doha. With the confidence and support of Dr. Ji, Mayor Doha chooses to run for mayor once more as the campaigns for both sides get underway. When Miho goes to the doctor for a checkup, she is officially diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She joins Chang-ho in celebrating his ascent in the race, suppressing her concerns for his benefit. Later that night, she talks about withholding things from one another out of consideration, occasionally speculating as to whether he is Big Mouse. When Miho finds out that he accepted the position only to have Mayor Doha removed, she is taken aback. She begs him to be a good big mouse who makes life better for others. She makes the decision to remember their happy times rather than telling her husband the truth. Jian is furious when NR Forum members offer to back his mayoral campaign, knowing full well that the mayor has rallied them to his cause despite disclosing his dark secret. He tries to expose her husband's wrongdoings, but Dr. Ji threatens to fire him, saying she already knows everything. She is unaware, though, that Mayor Doha is still using her as a pawn because of her trust. She refuses to see that his marriage to her was only a means of retaliation because she has such a great faith in him. Jian leaves in a huff after warning Mayor Doha of the trouble he is about to cause because he has no one on his side. After meeting Chang-ho, he provides information regarding Mayor Doha's special treatment of the different companies that belong to the members of the NR Forum. Jian accepts Chang-ho's suggestion to track down Chairman Kong's demon-like son in order to claim his inheritance because he is desperate enough to overthrow the mayor. Later, he runs into the prosecutor again and begs him to track down his murderous son, even revealing that another person had been detained in his place while he fled to America. Kwang Yin is told to Miho that he is receiving palliative care and is hurried to the hospital in another scene. Miho tells falsehoods about his mother's recovery from a bone marrow transplant after they first met before his siblings. Kwang Yin thanks Miho and exhales his last breath, relieved. Afterwards, Kwang Yin's sister admits that he played the part of a wealthy psychopath to get their mother to have the operation. Miho, filled with rage, confronts Dr. Ji regarding the wrongdoings of the hospital, threatening to expose the truth. She vows to make adjustments in order to disprove Dr. Ji. Later, while Chang-ho gets ready for the mayoral debate, Miho spends some time with him. The following morning, Young tells Mayor Doha about the cryptocurrency scam that occurred a few months prior and claims that the perpetrator has been apprehended. That day, Mr. John, the case's prosecutor, is invited to lunch with Mayor Doha. The mayor announces his desire for Chang-ho to withdraw from the mayoral contest and asks Mr. John for assistance. In another location, Sun speaks on behalf of Chang-ho during the briefing on the debate topics, and Young is at the broadcasting station. Sun notices a segment titled Citizens Representative, which has never been included before, and learns that following the debate, audience members will be able to ask questions. It is obvious that Mayor Doha and his group will try to ruin Chang-ho's reputation by setting this up. The news soon announces Mr. John's discovery that Chang-ho received a substantial payment from the cryptocurrency offender in exchange for the trial being lost. Jian affirms that Mayor Doha is the mastermind behind it all because he used comparable strategies to win the last election. That evening, Miho recalls her exposure to NF9 in the dubious pipes that purportedly belonged to a fish farm. Based on her memories of that incident, Miho determines that the NK chemical and NF9 secret is a powerful tool that will be used to exact revenge on Mayor Doha. After Chang-ho leaves for the debate rehearsal, Miho confirms the following morning that there is definitely something fishy about the fish farm she asked Jerry to investigate. He informs her that its owner, Mr. Company, was NK Chemical's former head of security and that the fish farm's extreme security is unmatched by any other. Even as the debate begins, Jerry and Miho assemble a team and make their way to the fish farm. Before long, Chunuk and his army storm the fish farm, breaking through the gates and overwhelming the guards. Security tries in vain to maintain control of the situation as the manager dashes to notify the owner. As Chunuk's team unleashes its might and eventually overwhelms the fish farm's security into submission, Miho waits in the safety of her car. The manager enters through the back door to locate a hiding spot outside after informing the owner about the arrival of gangsters on the property. Mr. Company, the owner, isn't as fortunate. He makes every effort to hide in his office, but he is eventually pulled outside. Chang-ho brings up the special accommodations Mayor Doha made for the NR Forum members' businesses during the debate, while denying any preferential treatment. The mayor is adamant that the money made by those who benefit from the special programs is used only to further Guten City. The moderator interrupts Chang-ho mid-argument, even though he still has a few minutes to finish. When they get back to the fish farm, Miho questions Mr. Ko about his relationship with NK Chemical. Miho suggests that the water she had earlier offered him was the safe groundwater they allegedly use, even though he denies any such thing. His demand to be taken right away to the hospital is indicative of the suspicious activity going on. He confesses the truth after Miho tests a small amount of the water to ensure its safety. Mr. Ko discloses that the fish farm uses radiation-heavy wastewater produced during the NK Chemical's NF9 refining process. The manager tells Young that the gangsters are aware of their dark secret from where he is hiding. In the meantime, Mayor Doha brings up the cryptocurrency case during the discussion and coerces Chang-ho into resigning from the election in the event that his corruption is shown to have occurred. Informing Lee of the impending catastrophe at the fish farm, Young pulls Lee from the discussion and gives the mayor's assistant the order to assemble a team. Lee chooses to stay put, but Young decides to go there. Jerry gives Sun an update on their huge discovery during the discussion. Chang-ho persists in pressuring Mayor Doha regarding his association with NK Chemical, the perils of NF9, and the city's 20-fold increase in cancer cases. He even discusses the unexplained death of Mr. Cho. Chang-ho runs out of time, so the mayor does not need to respond. Insisting that all of the fish be disposed of, Mr. Company records a testimony verifying that the fish farm was a front for the disposal of NK Chemicals wastewater. Additionally, he attests to getting paid by NK Chemical via a global paper company. When Young and his hired goons show up, Chanak tells Miho and Jerry to go to the broadcast station while his group deals with the newcomers. When Young sees Miho and Jerry walking away, he follows them. Lee advises Young to stop his advance by calling the police. Sun considers adding Miho to the list of citizen representatives for the conclusion of the debate after receiving her testimony from Mr. Company. When Sun contacts Warden Park and Lee contacts the police chief to pull some strings, the situation devolves into a power struggle. Soon after, Jerry is stopped by the police, which makes Young happy because it appears Lee's plan was successful. His relief, however, is fleeting because he becomes mired in an inspection and sees Jerry and Miho being escorted by the police. All thanks to Warden Park's connection to the chief of police. Sun foresees trouble and, with the assistance of the station head, who turns out to be a member of Big Mouse's organization, gets Miho added to the group of citizen representatives after identifying Mr. Min, the perpetrator of the cryptocurrency scam. During the debate, Mr. Min promises Mayor Doha that he will prove his innocence by presenting evidence of Chang-ho's corruption in the form of the serial numbers of the cash notes that were taken from Chang-ho's office. According to Chang-ho, the electorate should determine whether or not he should drop out of the race. Subsequently, Miho shows up on schedule, introduces herself, and states that she was exposed to radiation from NK Chemical. Everyone is shocked by this, including Chang-ho and her father. She declares that she was exposed to radiation when the subterranean pipe burst during the incident. Chang-ho is shocked to learn that she is terminally ill. After playing Mr. Ko's testimony, Miho asks Mayor Doha about his efforts to have the Special Substance Management Bill repealed. Mayor Doha puts up an act, saying that if Mr. Ko's testimony turns out to be accurate, they should look into the case without providing sanctuary. Jerry takes Chang-ho to Miho at his former office after the debate. As she watches him become emotional, Miho insists they make the most of their remaining time together. Chang-ho vows to do everything in his power to support his wife once he accepts the truth of her passing. In another scene, Gwang handles Miho's news on his own while calls are made for him to withdraw from the race. The following day, Mayor Doha is called into the prosecution office for an investigation with Dr. Ji. Being aware that Jayan and Chang-ho will be watching him be questioned, Mayor Doha says he will be easily re-elected as mayor of the city and challenges them to provide evidence of NK Chemicals' illegal dumping. After a little interrogation, Chang-ho asks Jayan to release Dr. Ji, realizing that they plan to place the blame for everything on Chairman Kong. As she is leaving, he meets her and informs her that Jayan will shortly be excavating the chairman's body in order to perform an autopsy. Dr. Ji is told about the chairman's autopsy and is aware that the mayor's assistant will be able to get in touch with him on her behalf. Mayor Doha declares an inquiry into NK Chemical after the prosecution fails to apprehend him despite a demanding 72 hours of questioning. 2 days later, as expected, the mayor wins the election, and Dr. Ji attends the festivities merely out of formality. Later, Dr. Ji sends them her husband's burner phone and leaves a note inside the package that is delivered to Miho at Chang-ho's office. Chang-ho affirms that she is willing to provide a testimony in court. Dr. Ji's conspicuous absence from the trial 2 days later causes concern for the group. The secretary of the chairman claims ownership of the burner phone and calls the last number that was dialed, which happens to be Mayor Doha's. The secretary demonstrates that Mayor Doha cannot be the owner of the burner phone because he wouldn't have called himself. Then it is revealed that Mayor Doha had asked the secretary for assistance after learning of his wife's deceit via a covert camera. In addition, the chief nurse of a mental health facility silences Dr. Ji as a form of punishment. Ultimately, for want of proof, the mayor is declared not guilty. Following the trial, Miho passes out unexpectedly and is taken to the hospital. Later, when she regains consciousness, she appears to know that her time is running out and gives one final expression of love. She dies peacefully in her sleep while holding Chang-ho's hand, so her wish is granted. Later, Chang-ho finds Mayor Doha at his swim session and declares that he has bought the entire building. The mayor is then accused by him of becoming a cowardly, power-hungry, evil person. Chang-ho mentions being relieved about not committing a sin after realizing that Mayor Doha has no regrets for the unending suffering and deaths brought about by his actions. Mayor Doha questions the hint and coughs up blood, which prompts Chang-ho to disclose that in K Chemicals wastewater has already been added to the pool's water. Mayor Doha, paying the price for his transgressions and meeting his demise in the same manner as innumerable others, returns to the water as Chang-ho exits the structure. The NF9 victims, represented by Chang-ho, file a $1 trillion lawsuit against NK Chemical over the course of the following few days. With Jian and Ashley's help, Dr. G's papers are recovered, and when Dr. G testifies in court regarding the connection between NF9 and cancer patients, the VIPs are sentenced to 10 years in prison alongside Warden Park and the other prisoners they had previously harassed. Jian eventually rises to the position of president of his conglomerate, and anonymous donations from the mayor end up funding a number of the city's nursing homes and orphanages. Chang-ho turns into the good and moral big mouse that Miho had hoped he would be. We appreciate your commitment to the very end. Please like and leave a comment if you liked this recap. I'll see you on the next one, as usual.